Chapter 55. Ren Baqin carried the box into the main hall. The Empress was wearing a red muslin dress with a white undergarment underneath. Her hair was simply tied up at the back of her head and she was concentrating on her dinner. It was as if she did not see Ren Baqin coming in. Ren Baqin could only stand there and wait with the box in his arms. After the incident in the afternoon, Ren Baqin's impression of the Empress changed greatly when he saw her again. Previously he only felt that this Empress was of noble status. Even though she could send a polar bear flying with a slap, Ren Baqin was rather surprised. However, after seeing the brute force of the Dao people, Ren Baqin was somewhat used to it. But today, after that so-called expert who came out of nowhere to challenge him, the Empress had already risen to the level of a humanoid Tyrannosaurus in his heart, second only to a Super Saiyan. Today, Ren Baqin obediently stood there with his head lowered. He did not even lift his head and stared at the box as he entered the main hall. This box looked much more beautiful under the illumination of the lanterns. The galaxy on the box was glowing with starlight. After the Empress finished her dinner, she said, "Today's dinner dishes are not bad. Cook the same dishes tomorrow." Her voice was cold. "Yes." Caretaker Go bowed and took away the dinner. "Come up. Why are you so well behaved today?" The Empress's cold voice sounded. Previously, even though he clearly knew that the Empress was in front of him, even though he clearly knew that accompanying a monarch was like accompanying a tiger, but since he came from the real world, Ren Baqin still had many habits that were hard to change, such as looking around and so on. Usually, when he was telling a story as the story progressed, he would often make all kinds of hand gestures, which made the Empress feel rather amused. Dao itself did not pay much attention to etiquette, so she did not feel that he was being rude. Therefore, when she saw him looking downwards and being so well behaved today, the Empress felt that it was a little strange. Ren Baqin hurriedly said, "I was just thinking that your Majesty's martial arts are matchless and your might is world-shaking. Today this kind of rascal actually dared to challenge your Majesty. He is really overestimating himself. He came all the way to Dao just to let your Majesty display your exceptional martial arts to deter the rascal. At the same time he can relax from handling state affairs and worrying about the people. From this point of view, he has succeeded and is considered to have made a contribution to Dao. I wonder if his contributions to Dao should be recorded in the annals of history." Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, who were behind the Empress, covered their mouths and giggled softly. They looked at Ren Baqin with interest. Not only did he know how to tell stories, but he was also very funny when he spoke. The corner of the Empress's mouth curled up slightly, but she immediately retracted it. Ren Baqin guessed that she should be in a good mood at this moment. It seemed that ever since his previous attempt at bootlicking failed miserably, his painstaking research had finally yielded some results. He felt slightly proud of himself. He still had some potential in this area. Following which, he carried the box and walked to the bottom of the stone steps. The Empress raised her head and saw the dark blue box that was decorated with galaxies. She was very interested and asked, "Is this what you want to present to me? What is it?" At the mention of the box in his hands, Ren Baqin became more spirited. He raised his head and said, "This is an air cooler." The weather was scorching hot now. Ordinary people were like this, not to mention the Empress who was in the palace handling the affairs of Dao every day and working hard for the welfare of millions of people. After much consideration, I specially made this air cooler to present to your Majesty. Following which, he took 2 steps forward and placed the box not far from the Empress. He said, "Your Majesty, I have been impolite. I still need some crushed ice and half a basin of water." "Qing Yuan. Hong Yuan," the Empress called out softly. Immediately, the maid from before nodded at Ren Baqin and went to fetch the water. Another maid then placed the basin of ice beside Ren Baqin's hand. Ren Baqin opened the lid, added the ice and water in succession, and then covered the lid. After a while, he reckoned that the ice water should have soaked through the cloth. He directly pulled the string on top of the fan. Immediately, the cold air was blown to the Empress's body along with the wind. The Empress let out a soft cry of surprise. She took 2 steps forward with great interest. Feeling the cold wind blowing on her body, she squinted her eyes, which appeared somewhat long and narrow. She had a satisfied look on her face. At this moment, her expression didn't make her look so heroic. After squinting her long and narrow eyes, she looked a little more gentle and charming. Her entire person looked beautiful and alluring. However, this was only for a moment. The Empress took a few steps forward again. She was separated from Ren Baqin by a box. Ren Baqin could even smell the fragrance coming from her body. His mind was slightly stirred and he immediately restrained his mind. Ren Baqin felt that he was about to become an old monk sitting still. The Empress opened the lid and looked at the structure inside. Then, she turned around and returned to the couch with a trace of a rare gentle smile on her face. If you put this thing a little further in, it would be rather cool to use. You are very considerate. Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. Ren Baqin lowered his head. Well, continue with your story, the Empress said while lying on the couch. Yes. Ren Baqin began to narrate the story while the Empress listened attentively while lying on the couch. As Ren Baqin narrated the story, the Empress didn't have any expression. However, the eyes of Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan lit up. Obviously, both of them were extremely interested in this story. Their mood also fluctuated along with the fate of each character in the story. After listening for a long time, the Empress waved her hand and asked, "Is there any other story?" After all, from her point of view, all those schemes and stratagems were nothing more than a sword. Those so-called valiant generals were equivalent to the ordinary soldiers of Dayo. It was just like listening to a group of ants fighting. At first it was still somewhat fresh, but after a few days it became somewhat boring. Hearing what the Empress said, the two maids were slightly disappointed. Both of them felt that this story was pretty good. Ren Baqin wasn't engrossed in his storytelling today. He had been paying attention to the Empress. Seeing that she waved her hand, he immediately stopped and nodded his head in agreement. Since it's like this, let me tell Your Majesty about the investiture of the gods, Ren Baqin said. Originally he wanted to talk about the journey to the west, but there were too many things that needed to be explained. It would be better to talk about the investiture of the gods first and then follow up with the journey to the west. What is it about? The Empress asked. It's about the ancient investiture of the gods, Ren Baqin replied. He thought that the martial arts level of the investiture of the gods was definitely high enough. The Empress was rather interested and said, "Oh, then let's talk about this." Yes. Ren Baqin opened his mouth and started from Pangu's creation of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors to give the Empress an idea. When he talked about how Su Hu rebelled against the Shang dynasty because he wanted him to offer his daughter, the Empress faintly sighed and said, "Exactly. Wasn't the founding of Dayo because of this?" These words made Ren Baqin slightly stunned. He really wasn't clear about what happened before the founding of Dayo. He only knew from Caretaker Shi's words that Dayo was originally made up of aboriginals and was founded 70 years ago. He wasn't clear about the specifics. He wasn't sure if it was because she was reminiscing about the past, but the Empress listened even more attentively. This investiture of the gods was much more interesting to her than the romance of the 3 kingdoms. Especially after Zheng Luan's 2 beams of white light that sucked people's souls, Chong Heihu's vision blurred, and he fell off his horse and was captured by Zheng Luan. This kind of story was extremely interesting to the Empress. She said, "These things in China are rather similar to Great Xia. It is said that there are also strange people in Great Xia, but they are rarely seen. Furthermore, China and Great Xia sound similar." Ren Baqin hurriedly said, "China is millions of miles away from Dayo, it's just a coincidence of the names." The Empress nodded her head in agreement and continued listening to the story. In the end, after hearing Ji Chang's persuasion and Su Hu's agreement to gift his daughter, she immediately raised her eyebrows and slapped the back of the couch. Immediately, wood splinters flew everywhere and the back of the couch was smashed into pieces by her slap. This Ji Chang's words are better than his singing. First, Su Hu rebelled, then he wanted to gift his daughter. He's neither a minister nor a father, he's hesitant and fickle. Ren Baqin shrunk his neck. This investiture of the gods wasn't written by him, so he couldn't be blamed. He didn't expect her to have such a big reaction when she heard this part. Combined with what the Empress said about Su Hu rebelling against the Shang dynasty, Ren Baqin felt that there might be a connection. Presumably, it was related to the reason why the first emperor of Dayo revolted. Chapter 56. Ren Baqin listened to a portion of Romance of the 3 Kingdoms and 3 chapters of Investiture of the Gods. The sky was already dark by then. Before leaving the palace, Ren Baqin hesitated whether he should tell the Empress about the salt well. However, after thinking about it, he was only 50% confident. If he messed it up, it might affect his value in the Empress's heart. In the end, he decided that it would be better to wait until his position was higher before using this method to exchange for credit. If he did it after the sweet potatoes were ripe, even if he failed, the impact wouldn't be too great. Ren Baqin returned to the beast park, found some mutton to eat and went to bed. The next morning he took his camera and walked around the beast park, taking pictures of all the beautiful places. He didn't dare to take pictures of the animals in the beast park. After all, many of them were different from those on Earth. If he took pictures and uploaded them on the internet, it would be too easy to expose himself. Rinpoche's current situation was that he had to hide his abilities even if he wanted to show off. Thinking about what the Empress said last night, Rinpoche was suddenly interested in the history of Dayo. He went to ask Ting Hulu and Tai Dao. The two of them were guarding a few big wooden basins and resting in a cool place. The basins were filled with animal hides that were being soaked. After hearing Rinpoche's inquiry, the two of them told him some of the things they knew. Rinpoche knew that most of the people in Dayo were originally aboriginals. 70 years ago, the Dayo people that Rinpoche saw now were actually aboriginals, but they were called barbarians by the outside world. They mainly lived in villages scattered in the 60,000 mountains in the west and south of Dayo and made a living by hunting. It was a vast and continuous mountain range that surrounded the west and most of the south of the current Dayo nation. There were countless ferocious beasts and many aboriginal strongholds in the mountain range. There was originally a country on this plain called the Hao Nation. At that time, the Hao Nation had been founded for more than 300 years and was extravagant. The king of the Hao Nation was as licentious as King Zhou of Sham. The aboriginal women were usually strong and had outstanding looks. They were completely different from the weak women of the Hao Nation and had a unique flavor. The Hao Nation's emperor listened to someone and ordered the aboriginals to offer up 100 women. Otherwise he would send troops to attack. Furthermore, the aboriginals were not under the jurisdiction of the Hao Nation. Furthermore, with their bad tempers, they naturally did not care about this matter. They even beat the messenger half dead and threw him down the mountain. The emperor of the Hao Nation was enraged when he received the report and immediately sent out 50,000 troops to suppress them. He also gave the order to annihilate the village and to send the young women back to the capital for him to enjoy. The aboriginals were organized in strongholds, and they didn't have much defense either. 5 strongholds were destroyed on the spot, and the people in the strongholds were all slaughtered while the women were taken away. Furthermore, the Hao Nation's army was still advancing into the forest. It was only at this time that the aboriginals reacted. Their anger spread like wildfire in the mountain range. The aboriginals who heard the news gathered together. However, there wasn't enough time, and the number of people who could gather wasn't too many. Relying on the special characteristics of the mountain forest, they set up layers of interception. After the Hao Nation's army broke through the 3rd layer, they were stopped by the 4th layer and could not advance any further. Both sides had suffered great losses. Although the individual strength of the barbarians was strong, they had lost thousands of people in the face of an army of 50,000. The Hao Nation's army wasn't used to fighting in the forest, so their losses were even greater. Almost 10,000 of them were buried in the forest. At this time, the person who persuaded the Hao Nation's emperor to conscript the women once again gave him a plan. Why did the aboriginals dare to disobey the Hao Nation's emperor? It was because the barbarians hunted, wore animal skins and picked wild fruits for a living. They didn't need anything from the outside world and could live freely in the forest. The Hao Nation couldn't send out troops to suppress them. Otherwise, the situation would be the same as now. If the Hao Nation wanted the barbarians to submit, they had to make it impossible for them to survive in the forest. They had no choice but to obey the Hao Nation. There was an unknown number of barbarians in the mountain range, but there was one thing that all of them needed: salt. There was a piece of rock salt in the mountain range, and almost all the salt used by the aboriginals came from there. As long as they poisoned the rock salt, the aboriginals would have to listen to the Hao Nation's emperor if they wanted salt. It could be considered as subduing the enemy without a fight. The Hao Nation's emperor was overjoyed when he heard this and immediately carried out the plan. At the same time, he had another thought. Although the Hao Nation was strong against the aboriginals, it was still weaker than the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation. If he could get the aboriginals to join the army, it would be very effective in attacking cities and strongholds. In the end, the aboriginals suffered heavy losses after the salt was poisoned. Half of the stronghold where Dayo Nation's first emperor, Yipeng, lived was either dead or injured. After his grief, he immediately contacted the other strongholds to revolt. They bypassed the tens of thousands of soldiers in the forest and launched a sneak attack on a city near the mountain range. Now both sides could be said to have a blood feud. At this time, a person came to seek refuge with Yipeng, saying that the Hao Nation's emperor destroyed his family and wanted revenge. At first, Yipeng sent people to watch over the other party and guard against him. Later on, when he saw that the other party was sincere in his plans and even destroyed the 40,000 soldiers, Yipeng began to trust him. At this time, the anger of the aboriginals had subsided a little. After the 40,000 soldiers were destroyed, there was no longer a threat to their survival. However, the rock salt was poisonous and could only be obtained by plundering cities. Therefore, all the strongholds had to unite and plunder. It had to be said that this was the Han nation's emperor's doing. The Aboriginals' losses also started to increase. At this time, that person gave advice to Yapeng. He said that this couldn't go on. They couldn't always rely on plundering to obtain salt. It was better to first occupy a few cities and hold them. Only then would they have the capital to negotiate and obtain salt from the Yun nation and the Qin nation. When Yapeng heard this, he agreed. He then contacted a few strongholds located in the depths of the mountain range. With that person as the military advisor, they went down the mountain to attack the strongholds and occupied 4 cities in a row. As the Han nation's 50,000 soldiers in the southwest had been completely annihilated, the remaining soldiers had to guard the east and north. At the same time, the Han nation's emperor was licentious and tyrannical. There was a rebellion in the region and they had to send troops to suppress it. Furthermore, the Han nation's emperor thought that the barbarians were only robbing some things and that the key was to quell the rebellion. Therefore, he didn't pay much attention to these barbarians. As a result, these cities were captured without much effort. At this time, that military advisor spoke again. The Aboriginals' lives were in the hands of others. No matter who became the emperor, if the barbarians weren't exchanged for salt, the barbarians could only rebel again. This would never end. Furthermore, this was a great opportunity. The Han nation's upper echelons were corrupt, their army was weak, and there was chaos in the country. It was better to directly occupy the palace and behead the main culprit. This way they could establish a nation and the descendants of the barbarians could live and work in peace and contentment. At that time, under this person's plan, the barbarians didn't suffer heavy losses regardless of whether it was annihilating the 40,000 soldiers or capturing the cities. The Aboriginals trusted him and were persuaded. The Aboriginals, who had never thought of this before, were tempted after hearing this idea. These days, they were envious of the prosperity they saw in the various cities. This person was also a strategist. Their current military strength was somewhat insufficient and they had to contact the Aboriginals in the depths of the mountain range. At the same time, if they attacked now, the Han nation's attention would be focused on them. It was better to occupy these cities first and pretend that they wouldn't attack anymore. Then they could contact the merchants from the Yun nation and the Qin nation to exchange the resources in these cities for salt. This way, the Han nation's emperor would definitely let down his guard and eliminate the rebellion in the country first. After hearing this, Yapeng felt that this was a good idea. Although the barbarians in the depths of the 60,000 mountains had other ways to obtain salt and wouldn't be so easily persuaded, he still sent a few people to persuade them. The reality was just as he said. The Han nation's emperor didn't expect the Aboriginals to dare to plot against him and focused all his energy on suppressing the rebellion. Another 8 months passed. During this half a year, the Aboriginals stayed in these cities and didn't attack again. This made the Han nation's emperor feel relieved. The war in the country was getting more and more intense. He mobilized all the available troops to suppress the rebellion. Only a small portion of the troops guarded the north and east. At this moment, a large number of Aboriginal soldiers walked out from the depths of the mountains and met up with Yapeng and the others. Then they set off for the imperial city. These Aboriginal soldiers from the depths of the mountain range were more powerful because of the harsh living environment and the presence of all kinds of ferocious beasts. During this period of time, they attacked the cities and waded through the rivers. Among them, the 2 most difficult passes were opened by people in the middle of the night. It turned out that the military counselor had already arranged people inside without anyone knowing. After 10 days, the barbarian army fought their way to the imperial city and finally executed the Han nation's emperor in public. Initially, Yapeng and the Aboriginals only wanted revenge and to plunder daily necessities. In the end, under the incitement of the military advisor, the Han nation was destroyed. When the Han nation's emperor saw the military advisor, he was extremely shocked. When he found out that the military advisor was the Aboriginals' military advisor, he became even crazier and shouted out everything. At this moment, everyone realized that the person who provoked the Han nation's emperor to demand 100 women from the Aboriginals and poison the stone salt was this military advisor. The military advisor didn't stop or defend himself and allowed the Han nation's emperor to reveal everything. After the Han nation's emperor finished speaking, he revealed another piece of shocking news. He was the one who arranged a few of the rebellions in the Han nation. He was also in contact with the other rebel armies. His goal was to destroy the Han nation. He had planned all of this for a total of 15 years. In addition to the 2 years of military campaigns, he had planned for a total of 17 years. At this moment, it could be said that everyone was fooled by him, including the Han Nation's emperor, the aboriginals, and even the rebel armies. Chapter 57. Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat as he listened to the story. He recalled how heroic the military advisor was back then. He single-handedly destroyed an entire nation and toyed with the troops of several parties. Such a person was indeed admirable. What happened next? Rinpoche asked. He really wanted to know what happened to the military advisor. Such a powerful person would definitely have arranged a way out for himself, right? Also, why did the military advisor do all these things? Later on, after the military advisor told everyone everything, he smiled and committed suicide by consuming poison in the face of everyone's anger. After his death, Yapeng found a few pieces of paper in his room. The paper included the arrangements for what happened after that and the reason why he did all these things. Rinpoche did not expect such an ending. That person actually committed suicide by consuming poison in the end. However, some people said that they saw him somewhere else. He faked his death that day. Who knows? Tai Dao shrugged his shoulders. Rinpoche was more convinced of this ending. How could a person with such a plan die just like that? Perhaps he really faked his death to escape and wandered the world incognito. Caretaker Rin, do you know why Her Majesty's surname is Qi? Tinghulu laughed. Rinpoche knew that Tinghulu must have a reason for asking this question. Combining it with the previous story, he suddenly had an idea. Could it be that person's surname is Qi? Yes. After the death of his family, the late emperor had no more worries. He did not expect to become the emperor one day. After the death of the military advisor, he changed his surname to Qi. Some people said that the late emperor changed his surname after reading the contents of the paper. What was written on the paper? Rinpoche asked curiously. He had always wanted to know why that person would do such a thing and even lose his life in the end. It could not be because he was a noble, pure, moral person, a person who was free from vulgar interests, and a person who was beneficial to the people. His entire life's plan was for the rise of the aboriginals and the establishment of Dayo, right? I don't know. Perhaps only Her Majesty knows now. Tinghulu shook his head and said, some people say that he is a mixed blood of the Han Nation and my people. How do you know so much? Rinpoche asked curiously. Logically, these things should not be spread to everyone, right? My ancestor was in the army that year and even attacked the palace, Tinghulu said. He told my grandfather and my grandfather told me. Me too. Tai Dao nodded. What happened to the Han Nation and the rebel soldiers? Rinpoche asked again. Some of them have fled to the Yun Nation, the Qin Nation and Great Xia, while the rest are living in the south, Tinghulu said. They're in the south? Does it also belong to Dayo? Rinpoche asked curiously. In any case, everyone knew that he was an outsider and knew nothing about Dayo. There was no need for him to hide anything. If they were curious, they could just ask directly. The plains in the south near the 60,000 mountains are all Dayo aboriginals, and their numbers are about the same as the aboriginals of Dayo. Of course, they're from Dayo, but they're not content with their lot. At first, Tinghulu was a little uncertain. Later on, when he mentioned that those people were restless, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Tai Dao, who was standing at the side, sneered. This was the first time Rinpoche saw such expressions on their faces. It seemed like there was a huge conflict between the aboriginals and the Han Nation in Dayo. However, thinking about it, no matter how licentious and tyrannical the Han Nation's emperor was, he was still a civilized nation. No matter what, he would not be willing to let the entire nation be destroyed by the barbarians in the mountains. In the history of China, weren't there many people with lofty ideals who fought against the Qing and restored the Ming? From the bottom of his heart, Rinpoche more or less sympathized with those people from the Han Nation. However, it seemed like he was on the same side as the aboriginals and had even integrated into them. Rinpoche could only sympathize with them in his heart. This was also because they had the same history. He himself did not have any sense of identity with the Han Nation. Both sides were very unfamiliar to him, but he was closer to the aboriginals. Rinpoche calculated in his heart. There were 30 to 40 million people in Dayo, but he did not know if that included the remnant citizens of the Han Nation. After asking, he confirmed that it indeed included the remnant citizens of the Han Nation. In this case, there were only 10 to 20 million aboriginals and most of them were in the mountains. However, no one knew exactly how many aboriginals there were in the 60,000 mountains. The 60,000 mountains were really too big. The deeper one went, the steeper it became. There were also more ferocious beasts and they were all very powerful. Until now, no one had passed through the 60,000 mountains to see what the other side was like. Currently, the Aboriginals only included the Aboriginal strongholds deep in the mountains from which the troops were deployed. Rinpoche asked a few more questions and both of them answered. Finally, Rinpoche had a certain understanding of the situation in Dayo. The original Hao Nation soldiers and the rebel army were defeated 3 times in the war with the Aboriginals, and the rebel army was almost completely wiped out. If it weren't for the fact that the Aboriginals also suffered heavy losses, the restlessness of the other nations, and Great Xia directly dispatched troops to occupy a few border cities, the Aboriginals would probably have wiped them all out. Under such circumstances, both sides took a step back. The rebel army and the majority of the Hao Nation soldiers in the south were similar to an autonomous system. This was arranged according to the last contents of the paper left by the military advisor. They could have a small number of troops, and the Hao Nation soldiers would govern the Hao Nation internally. However, the largest area they could control was the area of a city. A small number of troops could be maintained in the city, but the number of troops and equipment were considerably limited. In addition, the Aboriginals were superior to them in other aspects and weren't strict. On the whole, Dayo still maintained the simplicity of the Aboriginals and wasn't harsh on the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. In fact, other than the monarch of the Hao Nation, they didn't have any resentment towards the ordinary people. As such, the overall situation was that the Aboriginals would govern themselves, don't cause trouble and don't play any tricks. The Aboriginals couldn't be bothered to deal with them. If anything happened, the Aboriginals would immediately arrive. Even so, there were still people who didn't give up and would occasionally play tricks. In addition to the blood feud from the previous few wars, the conflict had become more and more intense over the years. Of course, the most important point was that there weren't any remnant citizens of the Hao Nation in the imperial court of Dayo. The highest position a remnant citizen of the Hao Nation could achieve was to become the lord of a city and guard that small piece of land. The remnant citizens of the Hao Nation rarely lived in other places. Both parties didn't integrate at all, and it seemed like the Aboriginals didn't have any intention of integrating the other party into their own. This was also one of the reasons why they weren't content with their lot. After all, there would always be people with ambitions and aspirations. Being the lord of a city wasn't enough to satisfy them. After all, the lord of a city was still in that small piece of land, and there would always be people who wanted a bigger sky. However, these weren't things that Rinpoche needed to worry about. From these past events, Rinpoche could roughly guess why the Empress had such a big reaction after hearing about the investiture of the gods. There were many aspects that were very similar to what the Aboriginals had experienced. As the 3 of them sat and chatted, 3 burly men dressed as imperial guards walked over from a distance. The one in front was Jianghu. When Rinpoche saw them, he stood up and was about to welcome them when he heard Jianghu say, "Rinpoche, receive the imperial edict." Rinpoche was dumbfounded when he heard this. He completely didn't know what to do. Should he kneel on one knee or both knees, or receive the edict while standing? He had no experience at all. Caretaker Ren, kneel on one knee and receive the edict. Jianghu knew Rinpoche's situation and reminded him in a soft voice. Rinpoche quickly did as he was told. Jianghu then unrolled a scroll that was black on the sides and white in the middle. The imperial edict of the Dayo Emperor declares that Rinpoche is a storyteller for Qingxin Palace Hall. Rinpoche was at a loss after hearing this. What was going on with storytelling in Qingxin Palace Hall? Could it be that there was an official who was responsible for telling stories to the emperor? Caretaker Rin, why aren't you receiving the imperial edict? Jianghu whispered. Your subject, receive the imperial edict. Rinpoche quickly raised both of his hands, just like how it was shown on television. After receiving the scroll, Rinpoche's mind was still in a daze. He didn't know what exactly was going on. He had definitely been promoted. Previously he was still a nobody. Now he could receive the imperial edict. This was definitely a promotion. Then what? What was he going to do? Where was he going to stay? Sir Rin, congratulations. Jianghu cupped his fists and said, Brother Shi, please don't call me sir. Just call me Brother Rin. Rinpoche pulled Jianghu to one side and asked, Brother Shi, what kind of official position is this? Jianghu shook his head with a strange expression and replied, I don't know. Chapter 58. It's written on the edict. Jianghu pointed at the edict. Rinpoche opened the edict. There were dozens of words on it, but he couldn't recognize any of them. He remembered that Jianghu didn't say more than 20 words when he read the edict. There were at least 40 to 50 words on the edict. What does it say? Before Rinpoche came here he never thought he would be illiterate. His English had passed level 4 and he could even understand a few words of Japanese, yamit. I don't know. Who looked serious and reliable. However, Rinpoche was dumbfounded after hearing his words. You don't know? Rinpoche almost shouted. I can't read. Who said matter-of-factly. Rinpoche opened his mouth wide and his tonsils almost popped out. Although he didn't know what his official position was, Caretaker Go of the Imperial Kitchen respected him a lot since he often came out to summon Rinpoche to the palace hall. With this kind of status, it would be considered low to call him a palace guard. Furthermore, the two soldiers just now obviously treated him as their leader. How could such a person be illiterate? Then what you said just now, it was dictated by Her Majesty, who said solemnly. Brother what do you know? Rinpoche's face twitched for a long time. From what Her Majesty said just now, Brother Rin, your official position is from Great Xia. This is the first time in Dayo that it's a reward. It's considered a secondary class, rank 8, and you receive a salary from the palace. Who finally knew something. He felt a little embarrassed after saying that he didn't know anything. Then what do I have to do? Where do I stay? Rinpoche was still at a loss. His current residence was in the Beast Park. If he couldn't stay in the Beast Park in the future, where would he stay? Furthermore, without Teng Hulu and Tai Dao, even with the electric baton, he didn't feel very safe. Her Majesty did say that because you have other responsibilities, you will stay in the Beast Park and wait at Qingxin Palace Hall every afternoon. Where is Qingxin Palace Hall? Rinpoche asked. It's the place where the palace books are kept. Here is a token. Hand it to the palace guards at noon and someone will bring you there. Who took out a token from his waist. Don't lose it. You'll need this token to enter and leave the palace. Rinpoche stretched out his hand to catch it. It wasn't a big plate, but it was very heavy and cold to the touch. He didn't know what kind of metal it was made of, but its surface was suffused with a silver glow. In any case, the fact that they were still staying in the Beast Park made Rinpoche feel more at ease. He was more familiar with this place and felt more secure here. It was just that he didn't have much time to go out in the future. Also, he would disappear once every 3 days. Even though the Empress knew about it and said that she wouldn't pursue the matter, he still felt that it was somewhat dangerous. It seemed like he still had to show his worth, lest the Empress suddenly couldn't find him and beheaded him in a bad mood. Thank you, Brother Please wait for me for a while. Rinpoche cupped his hands in obeisance and thanked Mu. Then he ran into the house and grabbed a handful of silver. Back then he had used a saw blade to cut off the large ingots of silver, and now he only had this kind of broken silver. According to what was said on TV at this time, it was necessary to bribe the person who came to announce the decree with money. From the perspective of human relations, it would not be a loss to offer him a handful of silver. Brother Rin is a quick-witted person. I won't stand on ceremony, I will look for you for a drink another day. Who laughed heartily and patted Rinpoche's shoulder. Then he stuffed the handful of silver to the 2 imperial guards behind him and said, This is from Brother Ren. Take it back and drink with you. Thank you, Sir Ren. The 2 imperial guards received the silver and laughed. They looked at Rinpoche with a gaze full of goodwill. It seemed like no matter where, money could do a lot of things. Of course, whose reputation was also involved in this. I shall not stay any longer, I still have to report back. Who cupped his hands in obeisance to Rinpoche, turned around and left with the 2 imperial guards. After Who left, Teng Hulu and Tai Dao went forward to congratulate Rinpoche. Congratulations, Caretaker Ren. From now on you will have to call you Sir Ren. Rinpoche touched the token. Until now he still felt that it was a little unreal. He had risen from a mediocre official to a secondary class, rank 8 official just like that? His rank was even higher than Caretaker Shi's. However, Rinpoche obviously had an official position and was receiving a salary. His authority was much lower than Caretaker Shi's. In any case, he was still an official. Previously, he had told stories for so many days and did not mention that he would be rewarded. Yet he was rewarded today. He did not know if it was because of the air cooler or his bootlicking skills. It was more likely that there were various reasons. Rinpoche returned to his room and took out 2 ingots of silver and threw them to the 2. Happy to see this. The 2 of them grabbed the silver and laughed. Sir Ren's official robe has not been delivered yet. You still have to go to the palace in the afternoon. I reckon it will be delivered before noon, Teng Hulu said. Rinpoche nodded. He had forgotten to ask about this matter just now. He was still inexperienced. He then asked curiously, What is the official position of that Shi who announced the imperial edict? He is a palace guard, but it seems like he will be promoted soon, Teng Hulu said. He then added, the palace guards are secondary class rank 5. They are the most elite warriors who are good at fighting. However, they only have ranks and no official positions. They are different from people like Sir Ren. Not long after, Caretaker Shi heard the news and rushed over. He cupped his fists and greeted Ren Baqin. Greetings, Sir Ren. Caretaker Shi, don't give me the cold shoulder, Ren Baqin hurriedly said. Just call me Brother Ren. That won't do. Now that your official position is higher than mine, I still have to address you as I should. Caretaker Shi laughed heartily. Sir Ren is having a joyous occasion today. Later, get the kitchen to prepare a few tables so that everyone can bask in the joyous atmosphere. Tai Dao and Teng Hulu immediately went to inform Caretaker Shi. Alright, there is no one else. Brother Shi, just call me Brother Ren. This official position is a reward. It is much worse than yours, Ren Baqin said. In that case, I will still call you Brother Ren in the future. Shi who patted Ren Baqin's shoulder. He almost slapped Ren Baqin into the ground. Ren Baqin's entire body immediately fell askew. Ren Baqin reckoned that his shoulder would swell up after this slap. Oh yes, Caretaker Shi, I am afraid I can no longer take up my position in the Beast Park. In the future, I will hand over the ice cellar to Caretaker Shi. As for those people, I will make arrangements for the ice cellar. Those 3 people in charge of the ice cellar will stay there. Out of the other 7, 5 will follow you. After all, there are still a few acres of land. I will arrange for the other 2 to do other things, Caretaker Shi immediately said. In that case, many thanks. Leave Teng Hulu and Tai Dao with me, Ren Baqin smiled. He was already familiar with Teng Hulu and Tai Dao. Ren Baqin still had some messy jobs that he had to hand over to the 2 of them to do. For example, skin tanning. He was even preparing to make a sofa. Ren Baqin touched the so-called imperial edict in his hand and asked tentatively without any expectations, Caretaker Shi, can you read? Chapter 59. Ren Baqin had to admit that the basic quality of education in Dayo was indeed worrying. In any case, it had already been 70 years since the founding of Dayo. Not many people were literate. Take a look at China. Before the founding of the People's Republic, the literacy rate was not high. 70 years later, although not everyone was literate, it was almost the same. In any case, Caretaker Shi was the chief caretaker of the Beast Park. He was a rank 9 martial artist and had dozens of subordinates. Including his family members, there were more than 100 of them. Can't even read? And that Shi who just now was a secondary class 5 imperial bodyguard who was illiterate. Ren Baqin was really doubtful about how they were going to convey documents and orders. They couldn't possibly just rely on oral instructions, right? When it was almost noon, 2 people from the palace came to deliver Ren Baqin's official robes. It was a set of clothes that was mainly black with a red collar and cuffs. There was even a bird pattern on it. The material was much softer than what Ren Baqin was wearing now. Furthermore, it felt smooth and felt like silk. The style was not that of ancient Chinese robes with big sleeves. Although the clothes were longer, reaching the knees, the sleeves were only slightly wider than ordinary clothes. After Ren Baqin changed into it, he couldn't see whether it looked good or not. However, the breathability and comfort were much better than before. The only thing that made him feel a little uncomfortable was that he was a little fat. The people of Dayo were all tall and sturdy. Their arms were strong enough to run a horse. Compared to them, Ren Baqin's physique was more than an order of magnitude lower. The clothes he wore made him look a little fat. Caretaker Shi was stunned when he saw Ren Baqin come out after changing his clothes. Soon after, he burst out laughing. Ren Baqin got goosebumps from his laughter. He didn't think he was wearing the wrong clothes, right? Look for me tonight, I'll get someone to help you change it. Caretaker Shi laughed heartily. Ren Baqin gestured at his baggy official robe and roughly knew why Caretaker Shi laughed. If he were to wear such big clothes, he would probably look like a monkey wearing a robe. However, he had to go to Qingxin Palace Hall at noon. It seemed like he could only change it after he returned. They had lunch as a form of celebration for Ren Baqin. Although that was the case, the food was no different from usual. The only difference was that there were more spices, which made the food more fragrant. The banquet was lively. Even though Ren Baqin hadn't stayed here for a long time, he was beginning to integrate into the culture. Seeing the sincere congratulatory smiles on everyone's faces, he felt a surge of warmth in his heart. These people were really too cute. Ren Baqin, who was still sighing just a second ago, immediately grabbed the stool to cover his chest and shouted, "Who's using their dirty claws to slap me again?" His face was filled with the words, "If you dare slap me with your oily claws again, I'll smash your face with a stool." After the meal, Rinpoche cupped his hands at everyone and entered the palace with a body full of claw marks. There was nothing he could do about it. He only had one set of official robes and he didn't even have a change of clothes. Time was up. Rinpoche clenched his teeth and left. Fortunately, the greasy claw print on the black robe was a little more conspicuous under the sunlight. If it was inside the hall, one would not be able to see it without looking carefully. He passed the token to the palace gate guards for inspection. The two of them asked him to wait for a while. One of them took the token and went in for 2 or 3 minutes before coming out empty-handed. Then the two of them and Rinpoche stared at each other as they waited. The two of them looked at Rinpoche, who was wearing an oversized official robe and had a body full of shiny, greasy claw marks. Their faces twitched. If they didn't know that they were the face of the palace and needed to maintain their manners, they would probably be lying there laughing. Anyway, Rinpoche couldn't see what he looked like, so he let them be. This robe was still quite comfortable. After waiting for a while, a female official in her 30s or 40s hurried out. She looked at Rinpoche and almost spurted out her saliva. "Follow me." That female official threw the token back to Rinpoche and said while holding back her laughter. Just as Rinpoche entered the door, he heard 2 people laughing behind him. "Shouldn't you at least wait for me to walk further away before laughing? Otherwise, why did you endure for so long just now? All I have to do is turn my back on him, right?" Just now, he directly stood with his back facing them, and they wouldn't have to endure for so long. "How should I address you, sir?" Rinpoche followed behind and asked cautiously. He didn't know the identity of the person in front of him, but he was an official bestowed by the Empress. He was afraid that he would have to enter the palace frequently in the future. It was better to maintain a good relationship no matter what. "Don't call me sir, call me Keeper Sure. Keeper is my position." Keeper Sure turned around and glanced at Rinpoche. "I understand." Rinpoche nodded his head. It seemed like Keeper Sure was really a big surname. Not knowing the other party's temperament, Rinpoche didn't dare to say much. The two of them walked in silence for a while and arrived in front of a palace. Keeper Sure stopped, turned around and said, "This is the place. You can enter with the token." "Thank you." Rinpoche cupped his hands and walked into the palace hall. This palace hall was about 2 stories high. It looked rather tall and occupied a large area. After pushing open the door and entering the palace hall, Rinpoche saw a 16 or 17-year-old girl sitting behind a table. She was wearing the same clothes as the female official just now, and she was holding a paper book. She was reading very seriously. If it wasn't for the fact that she was drooling, Rinpoche felt that she was a talent to be able to sit there with that book in her hand and sleep so soundly. She didn't even know that he had pushed open the door and entered. What made Rinpoche even more astonished was that she could actually become a female official at such a young age. Rinpoche saw that she was sleeping soundly and didn't disturb her. After taking a closer look, this female official was quite good-looking. Compared to the common Dayo women, she gave off a warm and fragrant vibe. He wasn't sure if it was because she didn't spend much time under the sun, but her skin was fairer. Furthermore, she didn't have that heroic and wild aura between her brows. After which, Rinpoche sized up the palace hall again. He saw that there were rows of rooms in the palace hall. The place where he was standing now was a passageway. However, the passageway was wider and was at least 3 meters wide. The rooms on both sides were made of hollow wood. He could see that there were many scrolls and books on the shelves inside. Some were made of animal skin and some were made of paper. Rinpoche reckoned that they were all books. In that case, this should be the book vault. After sizing up the place, Rinpoche had nothing to do. He leaned against the wall and stared blankly. After an unknown period of time, the book in the lady's hand fell to the ground with a thud. The lady woke up with a start. She hurriedly wiped her drool and bent over to pick up the book. She heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, she was the only one who saw it. Then she saw a man looking at her with a kind smile. "Ah." The girl's eyes suddenly widened like a frightened cat. Rinpoche hurriedly put down the token in his hand and showed it to her. "I'm new here today." "I remember now." The lady suddenly realized and then hammered her own head. "I forgot about this. You are the new storyteller of Qingshin Palace Hall, right?" The lady said. Following which, she raised her head and said, "Why didn't you greet me when you came in?" It seemed like she was angry that someone saw her drooling while she was sleeping. "Seeing that you were sleeping soundly, I didn't have the nerve to greet you." Rinpoche laughed. The lady fiercely glared at him. Chapter 60. Seeing that the other party didn't seem to want to talk to him, Rinpoche asked, "May I know how to address you?" The female official thought for a while and seemed to feel that she might have to see this man in front of her every day for a period of time, so she said, "My name is Lin Xiaola. Call me Librarian Li Lin." Ancient books? This was equivalent to a librarian, right? As Rinpoche thought about it, he asked the question that he was concerned about. "Greetings, Librarian Lin. May I know what I'm here for?" "I don't know. Just find a place to stay and don't disturb me. Wait for His Majesty to summon you into the palace hall," Lin Xiaola said casually. After hearing this, Rinpoche went to one side and stared blankly. After standing for a while, he got tired and sat on the ground. The ground inside seemed to be quite clean. Someone cleaned it every day, so there was not a speck of dust. Lin Xiaola ignored him and sat there reading. Not long after, Rinpoche noticed that her head was nodding bit by bit, and it looked like it was about to hit the table. Rinpoche was delighted to see her like this. This was the legendary falling asleep as soon as she touched the book. The person in charge of the library was actually someone who slept with books every day. It was somewhat different from his impression. Boom. Rinpoche spat out his drink when he saw that she was leaning against the table with her face. Librarian Lin was too much fun. He could watch her sleep for an entire afternoon. Ah. Lin Xiaola covered her nose and tears welled up in her eyes. When he realized that Rinpoche was staring at him, he scratched his head in frustration. Why can't I control my sleepiness? Someone saw him again. Her fine black hair instantly turned into a bird's nest, just like Mei Chao who had gone mad. What are you looking at? Haven't you seen people doze off before? Lin Xiaola was going crazy. Rinpoche held back his laughter, turned his head away, and silently added that there weren't many people who would use their faces to smash the table, especially when their faces were covered in saliva. After 3 to 4 minutes, Rinpoche reckoned that the other party had cleaned up. He turned his head and saw her pouting in a daze. When she realized that Rinpoche was looking at her, she immediately turned her head to the other side. The temperament of a little girl, Rinpoche thought to himself. Rinpoche was even more curious about how she managed to get her hands on the ancient books and records here. "Librarian Lin, can you read?" Rinpoche asked. "Of course." Lin Xiaola raised her head like a proud hen. "Can you teach me how to read?" Rinpoche laughed. He didn't know how long he would have to travel between these two worlds. He couldn't possibly be illiterate forever, right? There were so many books here. After he learned the words here, he could look for some books to read. Maybe there would be something he was interested in. "You can't read?" Lin Xiaola widened her eyes in astonishment. The storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall was actually illiterate? This was simply the biggest joke. Rinpoche spread his hands and said, "I really can't read. Can you teach me?" "No." Lin Xiaola turned her head away again. Rinpoche chuckled. He reckoned that Lin Xiaola, who had the temperament of a little girl, was inexplicably resentful. Let's talk about it when she forgets about it. Anyway, this matter was not urgent. After staying there for about an hour, 2 maids came in with cleaning tools. They cupped their fists and greeted Lin Xiaola, "Librarian Lin." It seemed like the common etiquette in Dayo was to cup one's fist and salute. Regardless of gender, they would only go down on one knee when they saw the emperor. Lin Xiaola kept a straight face and nodded at the 2 maids. The 2 of them looked at Rinpoche curiously and went in to clean up. Just as the 2 of them entered, an imperial guard came to the door and asked, "Is the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall here?" "Yes, I am." Rinpoche immediately jumped up from the ground, patted the non-existent dust off his butt and walked forward. "Her Majesty is looking for you," the imperial guard said and led him out. Rinpoche initially thought that he would return to the palace hall, but after making a few detours, he realized that the route was not right. The sound of an unknown musical instrument could be heard from afar. The sound was desolate and distant, and it gave people the feeling that it was full of simplicity and nature, just like the name of the Aboriginals. Following the sound of this musical instrument, they finally arrived at a garden. The garden was filled with exotic flowers and plants that competed with each other in beauty. There were also some trees that weren't very tall. It wasn't as exquisite as the gardens in China. The flowers and plants here were a little messy, but it was full of vitality. A river that wasn't considered deep flowed through the garden, and there was a stone bridge over it. Not far from the stone bridge, the Empress, who was dressed in red, was sitting in a pavilion. Beside her, there was a woman playing an unknown musical instrument. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were standing not far away. No matter where the Empress was, she would always have these two people by her side. This made Rinpoche realize that he could offend anyone in the palace except for the Empress and these two people. These two people were the so-called close officials. There were no eunuchs in Dayo's palace, only female officials, maids and imperial guards. These two people were definitely the most trusted aides of the Empress. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Rinpoche said as he knelt on one knee near the Empress. "You are a fast learner." The Empress shifted her gaze to Rinpoche, following which she was slightly stunned. Her eyebrows were raised at first, then slowly lowered. "How did you get yourself into such a sorry state?" The Empress's cold voice sounded. "I was careless in the afternoon." "Please forgive me, Your Majesty," Rinpoche quickly replied. "Even though Dayo doesn't place as much emphasis on style as Great Xia, but since you are now an official, you have to be more careful. If I see you in such a state again, you will definitely suffer." It was rare for the Empress to say a few more words, but it made Rinpoche break out in a cold sweat. "Yes, I know my mistake," Rinpoche quickly replied. In his heart he was cursing those fellows in the Beast Park. If it wasn't for them, he wouldn't have ended up in such a state. The Empress frowned slightly. "Where did you learn to say this from?" Rinpoche laughed dryly. He couldn't possibly say that he learned it from television, so he could only say, "It's like this in China." "Have you been an official in China before?" the Empress asked faintly. Rinpoche had never been a class monitor since he was young, let alone an official. In his heart he was wondering if he should brag or something. In any case there was no way to verify it. However, when he raised his head and saw the Empress's cold eyes, he immediately became terrified. He swallowed the words that were at the tip of his tongue and shook his head. "I have never been an official," he muttered in his heart. Her eyes were really too sharp. It was as if she could directly see through his heart. He didn't dare to lie even though he was already at the tip of his tongue. "Continue with your story," the Empress leaned back slightly and said. Rinpoche cleared his throat. Narrating the investiture of the gods with this bleak music gave him a special feeling. When he reached the part where the Emperor wanted the minister to die, he didn't dare to not die. The Empress asked, "Is China like this?" Rinpoche thought for a while and carefully replied, "There's another saying in China. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize it." The Empress repeated this saying, pondered for a while and nodded. "That makes some sense. The emperor of a country should take care of his own people. If his people can't even eat, what's the use of being the emperor? Naturally his people will rebel." He had to admit that the Empress was indeed very intelligent. Even though she had never heard of such words before, she could immediately understand the meaning behind it. Chapter 61. Thanks to Piss All Over 01, Tale of Dreams, Brother Hay of the Tujia family, and to the other readers who voted to comment in the book review and comment section. In fact, this book was prepared to be updated after it was published, but now that there are 3 branch chiefs, I have to express my gratitude. Thank you, everyone. The Empress waved her hand, stood up, and gazed into the distance in the pavilion. After a while she said, "However, there are some people who will always have different ideas no matter how you treat them. What do you think we should do with such people?" Rinpoche thought to himself that the Empress wasn't talking about him, right? He didn't have any messy ideas. It sounded more like she was talking about the remnant citizens of the Hao nation. But what did the Empress mean by saying this? Was she testing him? The person in front of him could pinch him to death with one hand. This wasn't an adjective. Rinpoche had no choice but to be careful. He didn't want to be meritorious, but he wanted to avoid making mistakes. After sorting out his words, Rinpoche cautiously said, "I feel that we should assimilate them and let them have a sense of identity with their country. This way, some people may not be able to change and may have other ideas, especially those who are older. However, the new generation can identify with the country from a young age. After they grow up, the situation will change." After Rinpoche finished speaking, the Empress turned to face him without saying anything. He didn't know what she was thinking. Apart from the sound of the musical instrument, there was nothing else. Just when Rinpoche was wondering if what he said didn't suit her, the Empress turned around and said coldly, "If I say so, all of them will be beheaded." Although the Empress didn't do anything else, her expression and words still made Rinpoche feel cold and subconsciously shrunk his neck. The Empress sat back in her original position and said, "If it wasn't for the late Emperor, I would have beheaded them. However, what you said is quite interesting. Tell me in detail." Rinpoche was now sure that the Empress was talking about the remnant citizens of the Hao nation. Although he didn't know why the Empress asked him, he still racked his brains and sorted out the things in his mind and listed them in 1, 2, 3, 4. To put it bluntly, it was the patriotism education. Regular lectures on patriotism, such as remembering the bitterness and sweetness of life, the 8 honors and 8 disgraces, would be lectured to them and required to memorize them. If there were conditions, it would be best to arrange for people to teach them in their private schools. They had to learn. At the same time, the culture and traditions of the Aboriginals were passed on to them, and the cultures of both sides merged. In the end, both sides lived together. Now, they were confined to a small circle and did not know much about the Aboriginals. Every day they came into contact with the remnants of the Hao nation. Furthermore, the Aboriginals had destroyed the nation. In the long run, they would naturally be surrounded by resentment. If both parties were to live together, the other party would see that there was nothing wrong with the Aboriginals other than their strength. Furthermore, the Aboriginals were simple and honest. Naturally, they would be less prejudiced against them. After all, most of the people were simple and honest no matter where they were. In reality, most of them were ambitious people. They were unwilling to accept the current situation, but they could not see the path to advancement. Naturally, they would have all kinds of ideas. If a certain number of official positions were opened up and they were allowed to enter the imperial court, in order to protect their own positions, they would suppress those who were disloyal. Step by step, this was patriotism education, division, and suppression. It was basically a method that had been used on Earth over and over again. The Empress quietly listened to what Rinpoche had to say. After he finished speaking, she remained silent for a long time before saying, "Continue with your story." Rinpoche could not read minds and naturally did not know what she was thinking. However, he guessed that she was probably considering the feasibility of this plan. Rinpoche felt that if she really wanted to do it, this plan was quite feasible. After all, it had already been proven on Earth. As long as it was adjusted according to the situation in Dayo, it would be fine. If this method did not work, Rinpoche had a more ruthless method. However, he was afraid that he would train a bunch of pyramid schemers. He now felt that he was like the henchman of the villain in a movie, helping to come up with all kinds of bad ideas. This was especially true for the remnants of the Hao nation. However, it was not without benefits for them. At the very least, they would be less scheming in private. This was to prevent the Empress in front of them from saying, "Behead," when she was in a bad mood. At that time there would really be heads rolling. When Rinpoche continued to talk about how the demon fox transformed into Daji and entered the palace, the Empress was absent-minded. However, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were engrossed in listening. When he talked about how Yun Zhongzi went down the mountain, the Empress then focused on the story. This kind of fairy tale was quite attractive to her. When he said, "If the emperor treats his subjects like brothers, then the subjects will treat the emperor like confidants. If the emperor treats his subjects like dirt, then the subjects will treat the emperor like bandits." The Empress was slightly enlightened. "These words of yours from China do make some sense." The Empress nodded. "The principles of the world are interconnected. It is the same everywhere," Rinpoche said. "That is not necessarily true." The Empress suddenly sneered. Rinpoche did not know if he had said something wrong. When Rinpoche talked about Fei Zhong's scheme to depose Empress Jiang, someone came to inform the Empress that it was time for dinner. "That's all for today. Go back and tidy up. Don't do this again tomorrow." The Empress stood up and said, "Yes." Rinpoche made up his mind to find someone to change his clothes and wash them quickly. "Your Majesty." Rinpoche saw that the Empress was about to leave and quickly called out, "Is there anything else?" The Empress turned sideways and looked at him. "I would like to ask, what is my official position?" Rinpoche was a little embarrassed. "Just do what you are doing now," the Empress said. She then left with Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan. The musician also started to pack his instruments. After the Empress left, Rinpoche smiled bitterly. It seemed like he was really a storyteller. However, this was also good. He still did not understand many aspects of Dayo. If he was asked to do something else, he would not be able to do it. This was not Earth. If he made any mistakes, he would at most be scolded or fined. Rinpoche followed the original route according to his memory and only found the way out of the palace when he was about to reach Qingxin Palace Hall. When he returned, he took off his clothes and found someone to change them. He lay on the bed and immediately felt a little tired. His mind was mostly thinking about the Empress's reaction at that time and guessing what she was thinking. Those remnant citizens of the Hao nation seemed to be very annoyed by the Empress. If not for the previous emperor's order, she would have killed them all. He did not know if his words could change the other party's mind and make her change her mind. After thinking about it, he felt that he had nothing better to do. He did not know what to do now. He had just become a storyteller in Qingxin Palace Hall and was actually worried about the life and death of 20 million people. These things should be left to the Empress and those people in the imperial court to consider. He should first learn the words here and read more books when he had nothing to do. He should understand the situation of this world first. Maslow's hierarchy of needs categorized human needs from low to high as physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, respect needs, and self-actualization needs. Chapter 62. The next morning, Rinpoche tried on the clothes that he had just washed and dried. It was not bad. Even though there was no mirror, he could feel that it fit his body. The one helping to change the clothes was the wife of an odd job worker. Her skills were quite good. After trying on the clothes, Rinpoche changed them so that those heartless fellows wouldn't leave claw marks all over his body. He didn't know when they would send him a change of official robes. Since he had nothing to do, he chatted with Teng Hulu and Tai Dao and listened to them talk about the military counselor. Rinpoche didn't chase after celebrities since kindergarten because it was too childish. Now he worshipped the military counselor like a fan. He would even listen to stories about the military counselor with great interest. There were many intelligent people in history and many of them were famous. However, there weren't many like him. It was a pity that the two of them didn't know his name. They only knew that his surname was Qi. It seemed that very few people mentioned his name at that time. As a result, not many people knew his name now. It was said that there was a portrait of him in the palace. It was drawn by an aboriginal who was very artistic. Rinpoche really wanted to see what it looked like when he had the chance. Thinking of the scrolls and books in Qingxin Palace Hall, Rinpoche felt that it was very likely there. After lunch, Rinpoche changed his clothes and strolled into the palace. He showed the token in front of the door and allowed him to enter. Rinpoche entered the palace and looked at the token in his hand. It seemed that the token was really useful. He could actually enter and exit the palace at will? A person of unknown origin like him could actually give this thing to him. However, thinking of the Empress's fighting strength, Rinpoche felt that she wouldn't put him in her eyes. Even if he stuffed a knife into his hand, he wouldn't be able to defend himself. Along the way to Qingxin Palace Hall, Rinpoche saw Lin Xiaola sitting on the stone steps in front of the door. She was supporting her chin with her hand and her eyes were squinted. Rinpoche couldn't figure out whether she was sleeping or not. Librarian Lin. Rinpoche walked over to her and greeted her. Seeing that she didn't respond, he shook his head and didn't disturb her anymore. He let her be immersed in her dream. When he entered Qingxin Palace Hall, he saw another book on the table. This time it was a book made of animal hide. He didn't know how long it had been there, but it looked rather old. Rinpoche picked it up and flipped through it. There were only a few dozen words on each page and each word was like a drawing. However, there were a few characters that were similar to Chinese characters such as San, Ri, Yun, and Wang. He just didn't know if they had the same meaning. Interspersed in the middle were a few pictures of people performing various actions. Secret manuals of martial arts? Rinpoche immediately thought of this and immediately became excited. Even if he couldn't become an expert like the Empress, it would still be good if he could strengthen his body. He didn't need to give way to anyone he saw when he went out. It was really damaging to a man's dignity that anyone could beat 8 of him with one hand. It was a pity that he couldn't recognize the words on it. Many of the words looked similar and he couldn't even remember them. After a while, Rinpoche helplessly placed the booklet back on the table. Looks like I'll have to wait until I learn how to read. When it was almost evening, Rinpoche was called into the hall to tell a story. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard the Empress's voice. "Are you going to disappear again tomorrow?" Rinpoche immediately broke out in a cold sweat. It was as if his body was petrified. He turned around with difficulty and forced a smile. "Your Majesty's eyes are like pearls, your foresight is like that of a deity, your wisdom is outstanding, your foresight is far-sighted, and you have the pearl of wisdom in your hands. I'm terrified and I'm in awe." "It's true that I'm terrified. As for the rest, it's hard to say," the Empress said coldly. "Forget it, I've said that as long as you do your best, I won't interfere. You may leave." After being beaten, Rinpoche escaped from the palace as if he had been pardoned. After leaving the palace, he heaved a sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. In just a short while his back was drenched again. After going through the Empress's words in his mind, he was afraid that the words, "do my best," were what the Empress wanted to say. The matter of the salt well had to be put on the agenda as soon as possible. With the merits of the salt well and the sweet potatoes, his head would probably be more stable. Along the way he lowered his head and walked while thinking. In the darkness, his head directly hit a wall and he took 2 steps back. When he looked up, he realized that the wall was Caretaker Sure. "What's wrong? You look absent-minded," Caretaker Sure asked, startling a flock of birds in the surroundings. Rinpoche took another 2 steps back before he composed himself and said, "Nothing, I'm just thinking about something. How's the shaved ice shop?" Caretaker Sure immediately became happy when he mentioned this matter. He took 2 steps forward and almost slapped Rinpoche to the ground. After that he laughed heartily and said, "Brother Rin, you're awesome, huh? If we do as you say, the shop would be extremely busy for the next 2 days." Rinpoche rubbed his shoulder and grimaced in pain. Just now he wanted to dodge but failed. Caretaker Sure's movements were much faster than his. "As long as the business is good, it's good. However, don't slap me." Rinpoche saw Caretaker Sure raise his palm again and hurriedly jumped far away like a rabbit. Caretaker Sure laughed a few more times. It was obvious that he was really happy. Caretaker Sure stretched out his palm and said, "These 2 days we have been selling 1 to 200 bowls a day. It's a shop. A bowl cost 5 copper coins, so 1 million coins would be 5 taels of silver. In other words, they could earn 7 to 8 taels of silver a day, and the profit would be at least 60%. In other words, they could earn 4 to 5 taels of silver a day, and in a month, they would earn 100 taels of silver. As for the money for the shop and the labor, they did not have much left. After deducting them, they would have at least 80 taels of silver a month. The 2 shops added up to a total of 160 taels. If they split the profits, each person would get 80 taels. To Caretaker Sure, whose monthly salary was only 6 taels, it was equivalent to his annual salary. No wonder he was so happy. However, Rinpoche's attention was completely focused on Caretaker Sure's palm. No matter how hard he racked his brains, he could not figure out how Caretaker Sure's 5 fingers had anything to do with 1 or 2. Were the people of Dayo all like this? Just by gesturing a number he would stretch out all 5 fingers? After listening to Caretaker Sure's words, Rinpoche nodded his head slightly. Earning money was within his expectations. In fact, it was slightly less than what he had expected. After all, Dayo was so hot. This kind of shaved ice would definitely sell well. Some of the people who sold ice cream on the pedestrian streets in China earned quite a lot in a month. Furthermore, the weather here was even hotter. Furthermore, this was an exclusive business. Rinpoche reckoned that he would be able to sell more shaved ice cream after word of mouth spread. This would continue until the secret of saltpeter was discovered. Hire 2 more people. I reckon this business will last for a period of time, Rinpoche said. I will listen to you. Now that he saw the money, Caretaker Sure was immediately filled with heroism. He would do whatever Rinpoche said and was not worried at all. Chapter 63. When he woke up, he was back in his bedroom in China. When will it end? Rinpoche rubbed his face and sat up from the bed. He did not need to worry about China anymore. A collaboration with the Qin family for the black mud cream recipe was enough for him to eat for the rest of his life. Now he had to stabilize his position in Dayo. At the very least, he wouldn't lose his head one day. After sitting on the bed in a daze for a while, he saw that the sky had already started to brighten. He opened the window and a gust of cold wind blew in. It's getting colder, Rinpoche muttered to himself. The time between the 2 sides was not equal. Basically, a round trip would take 12 days and 3 trips would take more than a month. He only felt that 10 days had passed, but in reality, a month had passed. Therefore, he felt that the climate change was particularly abrupt. Another reason was that after returning from that world, he felt that the air in the city was especially turbid and had a pungent smell. This made him more and more reluctant to go out. After standing in front of the window in a daze for a while, Rinpoche thought that it would be great if he could see the profits from the black mud cream earlier. At that time he could buy a small island and live on it without having to endure this turbid air. However, he also knew that the black mud cream was destined to take a long time to reap results. 3 to 5 years was considered short. Not to mention the research and development of the drug and the subsequent experiments, just building a pharmaceutical factory from scratch was not a simple task. It seemed that he still had to think of ways to earn more money. Distant water cannot quench present thirst. After thinking about it, he realized that there wasn't anything that he could bring back to Dayo to make money from. Would he dare to sell pandas? Even he didn't dare to use the sharp-toothed tiger's skin. There was no such creature on Earth. The closest one was the sword-thorn tiger, which had gone extinct hundreds of millions of years ago. Basically, whatever they had on Earth, they didn't dare to take it out, or even if they did, they wouldn't have much value. He didn't dare to take out things that Earth didn't have. Unless it was something like a prescription, but the benefits were still too slow. He could earn about 80 taels of silver a month. Including the shop that was still under renovation, he could earn about 100 taels of silver, which was about 40 to 50,000 taels of silver. With the addition of the air cooler, he might be able to earn more. However, there seemed to be a risk in selling silver in large quantities over a long period of time. For an ordinary person, 4 to 500,000 yuan a year was a lot, but for the current Rinpoche, it was like a drop in the bucket. Worrying about selling whey powder and earning money from selling cabbages. This was the kind of person who said this. Rinpoche suddenly recalled that Dayo seemed to have a lot of gemstones. He wondered if he could find out more about them after he returned to Dayo. It would be more feasible to bring back some gems. It would be best if the quantity was small but the value was huge. After being in a daze for a while, Rinpoche switched on his phone, which had been switched off all this while, to take a look. Just as he switched it on, a few missed calls and messages popped up. 2 from Qin Qing, 1 from Dong Haiqing, 1 from Qin Bing, and 1 from his family. He dialed the number back, and as soon as the call connected, he heard someone scolding him. "You still know how to call back. I called you, but your phone was turned off. I couldn't find you. If you didn't call me back, I would have called the police and reported you missing." Rinpoche moved the phone away from his ear. After a long time, he waited for the person on the other side to finish scolding him before saying, "Recently, the company has been rather busy. I work overtime every day and didn't notice that my phone ran out of battery. I just finished my work today, so I called to greet you." "Oh, you even know how to use words?" Rinpoche's mother mumbled before asking, "How's the situation at the company?" "Very good, it's getting better and better." Rinpoche changed to a relaxed tone. "Forget it, I don't know about those things. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival, are you coming back?" "It's still not too late to take a taxi." "Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival?" Rinpoche asked doubtfully. "Have you been living a stupid life? You don't even know the date?" "Oh, I've been too busy recently and didn't notice. I'll set off now and we'll be back in the afternoon," Rinpoche replied hurriedly. "That's more like it. Come back soon." After hanging up the phone, Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that only a few days had passed. More than 2 months had passed. He had a look of resentment on his face. When was he going to end? However, after thinking about it, if he really transmigrated to that world and couldn't return, he didn't know how sad his family would be. Rinpoche felt that the current situation wasn't too bad. Rinpoche looked at Qin Qing's missed calls and suddenly remembered that Qin Qing's engagement date was approaching. It was a pity that he didn't have anything good to give him. Qin Qing had money and didn't seem to lack anything. After thinking about it, Rinpoche decided not to call him back. After washing up, he changed his clothes, went downstairs and drove home. Rinpoche's hometown was about 300 kilometers away. He arrived at his neighborhood in the afternoon. Looking at the familiar but slightly dilapidated neighborhood, Rinpoche felt an inexplicable sense of comfort. This was the feeling of home. "Brother, brother." Rinpoche heard someone shouting and looked up. He saw his brother waving at him from the window. Rinpoche smiled, locked his car, went upstairs and knocked on the door. "Is the Audi downstairs yours?" Rinpoche's father asked as soon as he opened the door. "Your eyesight is really good." Rinpoche gave him a thumbs up. "Nonsense, it's not like you don't know that I have telescopic vision." Rinpoche's father gave him a slap on the head. "Give me the keys, I'll go for a stroll." Rinpoche smiled and threw the keys to his father. He knew that his father had always liked cars, but he had 2 children to support. After so many years, he had only bought a second-hand Alto to use as a means of transportation. Therefore, when he saw this car, he couldn't help but feel excited. "Look at you, it's just a car, what's so good about driving?" His mother's voice came from the kitchen. His father ignored her, took the keys and rushed out excitedly. "Brother, do you have a gift for me?" Rinpoche's brother surrounded him as soon as his father left. Rinpoche's brother, Ren Wanyin, was in his 3rd year of high school this year. He was taller than him, more handsome, had good grades and was cheerful. It seemed that all the good points of the family were concentrated on him. However, between the 2 brothers, one was Rinpoche and the other was Ren Wanyin. It could be seen that their parents had high expectations for them. Regarding this expectation, Rinpoche only wanted to say, "I really can't do it. I'll buy you a mobile phone tomorrow." Rinpoche looked at his brother's height and the fact that he could definitely rely on his looks to make a living. He couldn't help but feel envious and jealous. "Thank you, brother." Ren Wanyin immediately beamed with joy. Ren Bachien put down the things, went into the kitchen and saw that they were all his favorite dishes. It seemed like they had just started cooking. It seemed that his mother had been preparing for the whole morning and was waiting for him to come home. She was afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat hot food. "Since you are back, go to one side and don't be a hindrance." His mother's words threw the little bit of warmth that had just risen in Ren Baqian's heart into the gutter. He touched his nose and went to sit on the sofa. "Brother, what does your company do?" Ren Wanyin moved to Ren Baqian's side and asked. "Medicine." "Medicine? Brother, when did you learn about this?" Ren Wanyin asked curiously. "Your brother knows a lot." Ren Baqian had a proud look on his face. Chapter 64. Not long after, when the dishes were ready, his father also came back at the right time. He opened his mouth and asked, "How much is your car?" Ren Baqian looked at the kitchen and gestured 6. He didn't dare to say anything as he was afraid that his mother would hear him and nag him again. "It's indeed promising, but it's too extravagant. Your company has just been established and we don't know what the future holds. Don't just think about enjoying life. You should keep more money by your side so that you can make a comeback if anything happens," Ren Baqian's father said. "How much do you have in your pockets?" "I'll leave the 300,000 here. Take it back if you need it. There's still a few 100,000 left. Don't worry, it's enough. There's nothing to spend money on right now. We just have to wait for the subsequent profits. Didn't we agree last time? I'll provide the technology and the others will provide the money." Ren Baqian laughed. In his heart, he knew that his father was saying these words of wisdom. Indeed, 2 million yuan could not do much. With the remaining money, he could hold on until the pharmaceutical factory was built and the medicine was on the market. However, if something happened to his family, he would be at a loss. It seemed that he still had to find a way to earn more money, like what he had thought in the morning. While they were eating, Ren Baqian's mother asked him with a kind face, "You are quite successful now, but you are already so old. Do you have a girlfriend?" Ren Baqian was at a loss. "I'm only 24 years old, what do you mean by that?" "Your Aunt Huang has a niece. She's pretty and tall. Do you want to get to know her?" "I think I can find someone better." Ren Baqian quickly rejected her. He was only 24 and he was running around in 2 different worlds. How was he supposed to find a girlfriend? Disappearing for 8 to 10 days every 3 days? If that was the case, it would be more reliable for him to find a wife there than on Earth. At the thought of this, Ren Baqian felt even more resentful. Over there, even a woman could beat him up with one hand. Listening to his mother's nagging, Ren Baqian almost buried his face in his bowl. All he could hear was Auntie Huang's daughter. "So what? You set your sights higher after earning money. How is Auntie Huang's daughter suitable for marriage?" He didn't expect that he would have such a day. And in the foreseeable future, there would be many more days like this. After the meal, Ren Baqian ran back to the house as if he was fleeing for his life. The next day, Ren Baqian brought Ren Wanyin to buy the latest mobile phone, and Ren Wanyin was beaming with joy. "Remember, when you see a good cabbage, you have to take it first. Don't be like me. When I was in school, I wouldn't allow any contact with girls even if I was beaten to death. After I graduated, I couldn't wait to hug a grandchild." Ren Baqian pulled Ren Wanyin's hand with a face full of resentment. Ren Wanyin rolled his eyes and laughed heartily. "Anyway, even if the sky falls down, there will be someone taller to hold it up. You are the elder brother and you are not married yet. Why should I be anxious?" Ren Baqian was speechless. He had become a shield. However, when he thought about how it would be like this every time he returned home, he felt a headache coming on. It seemed like he would have to rent a girlfriend if he didn't want to be nagged. He didn't know if she was reliable or not. After staying at home for 2 days, he drove back early in the morning on the 3rd day. In the afternoon, he went to the supermarket and bought quite a lot of White Rabbit creamy candies. All of this was to bribe librarian Lin Xiaola. Normally, little girls would like this, right? Like a weird uncle, Ren Baqian pondered over how to make the little girl happy. After all, being illiterate was not an easy life. He guarded so many scrolls, but he couldn't understand a single one of them. After buying a bunch of White Rabbit creamy candies, he went to buy 2 electric batons and charged them at home before returning Qin Qing's call. "You finally called back. Otherwise, I would have reported you to the police and reported you missing." Ren Baqian smiled bitterly. This was basically the same reaction. "How are the preparations for your engagement with Jiang Nan going?" Ren Baqian asked with a smile. "On the 8th of next month you should be fine by then, right? Don't miss it," Qin Qing whispered. Ren Baqian could tell from his voice that he was probably with a girl now. After calculating the time including today there were still 10 days left. By then he would be back. Only then did he say, "Don't worry, I won't miss it." "Alright then, I won't say any more." Chen Qing hung up the phone after finishing his sentence. Rinpoche shook his head. They were getting engaged in 10 days and he was still fooling around outside. It must have been hard on Jiang Nan to actually tolerate him. Rinpoche hoped that after the engagement, Chen Qing would change his mind. Thinking about Chen Qing's character, he was usually quite reliable and should be able to do it. This was the last time he would go crazy before the engagement. At night, Rinpoche directly returned to that world with a bunch of white rabbit creamy candies and 2 electric batons. After waking up in the morning, he inserted the 2 electric batons into his waist. Rinpoche felt that he was like a Jedi, except for the fact that the 2 electric batons were a little short and small. Just when he was feeling satisfied in the house, he saw a black shadow moving up and down by the window. From the shadow, it had a fat head and big ears, and the ears were even on top of its head. When he opened the door he saw Tian Tian lying on the floor and Gun Gun stepping on its body, trying to think of a way to open the window. After seeing Rinpoche, Tian Tian immediately got up and walked away. It didn't care that there was a fellow on its body. Just like that, Gun Gun's stool was taken away. It fell head first onto the floor and rolled around. After shaking its head for a long time, it crawled over and hugged Rinpoche's thigh, shaking it continuously. Rinpoche teased the 2 little fellows for a while and went to get a basket of bamboo leaves for them. In the morning he went to the fields for a walk. When he was about to return, he saw a badly battered caretaker Shi striding towards Rinpoche. As he walked he shouted, "Brother Rin, why can't you use your sect's secret treasure?" "Can't use it?" Rinpoche was slightly puzzled. "Let me take a look. Also, what happened to your face?" Rinpoche took it and immediately poked it at caretaker Shi. The badly battered caretaker Shi looked at Rinpoche and laughed heartily. He almost slapped Rinpoche into the ground again. "It's out of battery." Rinpoche hid far away from him and said doubtfully, "Logically speaking, it should be able to be recharged more than 10 times. Why did it run out so quickly?" "How do you charge it? Do you want to be struck by lightning during a thunderstorm to recharge?" Caretaker Shi asked curiously. Rinpoche looked at him silently. "Be struck by lightning during a thunderstorm to recharge? Good idea." Li Yuanba probably had the same idea. The 2 of them must have a common language. However, the ancient people knew too little about electricity. Their knowledge was also very simple. It was normal for them to think this way. "Why did it run out so quickly?" Rinpoche asked. He was curious about what caretaker Shi did with this thing. He thought about caretaker Shi's character. His 2 eyes were like national treasures. His face and the corners of his mouth were swollen with blood clots. Rinpoche felt that something must have happened. Sure enough, it was as Rinpoche expected. When caretaker Shi heard Rinpoche's question, he laughed heartily. With a proud look on his face he said, "Those fellows still dared to show off to me. I fought against 8 of them." Chapter 65. Rinpoche quickly took 2 steps back and said, "If someone seeks revenge, don't say that I gave it to you. Don't worry, Brother Rin. If they ask me, I will tell them that this is your sect's secret treasure." Caretaker Shi laughed heartily. Rinpoche facepalmed. "What a pig-like teammate. You took the stun baton to stir up trouble and even sold me out. You can fight against 8 people but 8 of me can't even defeat 1 person." Rinpoche wanted to cry but no tears came out. "Who exactly did you beat up?" "Shi Guo from Lan City's Public Order Bureau, Shi Kai and Shi Da from the Imperial Guard Camp, Shi Qing and Shi Zhen from the Left Army, Shi Meng from the Department of Military Arms, and Shi Feng from the Left Army. These people always say that I am the caretaker of the Beast Park. Let's see who dares to say anything now." Caretaker Shi looked pleased. Rinpoche's face darkened as he listened. "You can find so many people with different positions to fight with just a stun baton. If I give you a gun, will you still be able to fly? Didn't you just beat up your own family?" Rinpoche regretted that this thing fell into caretaker Shi's hands. "It's out of battery. Let's recharge it when we have the chance." Rinpoche walked back listlessly. Caretaker Shi was all smiles as he continuously bragged about how he punched the Public Order Bureau and kicked the guards away. If Rinpoche did not see caretaker Shi's bruised and swollen face, he might have believed him. "Where is Shi Wanshan? Ask him to come out." Before Rinpoche could return, he heard shouts coming from the front. "This group of people found me so quickly. How did they find me so quickly?" Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat. He glared at Caretaker Shi. His meaning was clear. You are the one who caused this trouble. You should settle it. Give me another 2 secret treasures. I can still beat up 8 of them by myself. Caretaker Shi laughed. Ren Baqin was speechless. He took out a stun baton from his waist and threw it to Caretaker Shi. I only have 1. Think of a way to deal with them. Bear your own responsibility. Caretaker Shi laughed mischievously. With a majestic posture, he dashed in the direction of the voice. Shi Wanshan, you bastard, come out. The cursing continued, and he could tell that there were quite a few voices. It was likely that all of them had come looking for him together, or they had come looking for him separately and bumped into him at the door. Ren Baqin shook his head. This time they were prepared. Was Caretaker Shi still thinking of fighting against 8 of them? Dream on. If he went, he probably wouldn't be able to return. It was better for him to find a place to hide. Don't let people follow the clues and find me here. After walking 1 round outside, Ren Baqin estimated that it was almost lunchtime before he went back. As soon as he returned, he saw Caretaker Shi standing there with his head and face covered in dirt. He could not even recognize his face. Brother Ren, they are too shameless. 8 of them are ganging up on me. Caretaker Shi pulled Ren Baqin's hand and complained. Previously you said that you could defeat all 8 of them by yourself. Ren Baqin couldn't help but complain. I fought them 1 by 1. Along the way I fought against 8 of them. How can it be the same when the 8 of them attacked me together? Caretaker Shi sighed. Forget it, let's find it next time. Ren Baqin had no choice but to comfort her. Your sect's secret treasure. No, it's just that one. The other one ran out of battery because of you. Ren Baqin threw Caretaker Shi aside and ran over to scoop rice. Needless to say, that electric baton must have fallen into someone else's hands. Ignoring Caretaker Shi's bruised and swollen face, the others also turned a blind eye. It was common for men in Dayo to be in such a situation. They even teased him a little. First, I fought against 8 of them. I punched the public order division and kicked Swijun. Then the 8 of them attacked me together. I was outnumbered. Caretaker Shi refused to relent and insisted that he once fought against 8 of them. The odd job workers in the courtyard roared with laughter. The hierarchy in this world wasn't that strict. These odd job workers were like company employees while Caretaker Shi was like the company manager. Both parties could still make harmless jokes. This made Ren Baqin feel rather comfortable. After lunch, Ren Baqin carried half a bag of white rabbit creamy candies and entered the palace. While walking, he threw one into his mouth. Tasted pretty good. It had a strong milky fragrance. No wonder it had lasted for so many years. He chewed as he walked. When he arrived at Qingxin Palace Hall, Ren Baqin liked to chew. He found it troublesome to keep it in his mouth. Lin Xiaola sat on the chair. This time she finally heard the sound of Ren Baqin opening the door. She drowsily opened her eyes. After seeing that it was Ren Baqin, she yawned and prepared to continue sleeping. This is for you. Ren Baqin took out 3 white rabbit creamy candies and threw them on the table. What's that? Lin Xiaola finally opened her eyes when she heard about food. It seemed that foodies weren't just an attribute of Earthlings. It was the same for people from the other world. Looking at the 3 little things on the table, Lin Xiaola snorted, Humph, you want to bribe me with these things? This is for you. Try it. I'm sure you haven't eaten it before. Ren Baqin took out another candy from his bosom, removed the wrapper and threw it into his mouth. He looked like he was trying to abduct a little girl. Lin Xiaola looked disgusted. Her hands moved quickly and copied Ren Baqin's actions. She removed the wrapper and threw it into her mouth. Lin Xiaola's eyes widened. She looked like she had eaten something good. She wiped the table with her claws and the 2 candies were gone. Then she said to Ren Baqin with an unclear voice, What do you want to do? Teach me how to read, Ren Baqin replied. I knew you were up to no good. 100 a day. This thing. Lin Xiaola immediately fell under the taste of the white rabbit creamy candies. She showed 2 of them to Ren Baqin and haggled. 10. This thing is very rare. You haven't seen it before, right? How can you make 100 such exquisite candies a day? Ren Baqin said. 100 candies wasn't a lot. 1.5 bags were worth about 40 yuan. It was much cheaper than hiring a teacher. However, he still had to bring them over from the real world. Furthermore, it was quite troublesome to bring a bag of candies into the palace every time. 50. Lin Xiaola hesitated for a long time. Finally, she stretched out her hand and spread her 5 fingers. Ren Baqin was gratified. She was indeed literate. He finally met someone who could count. However, he said, 15. I really can't have too many. It's too troublesome to make them. Finally, after haggling, they settled on 20 pieces of candies a day. After that, Rinpoche was elated. He could finally learn how to read. Let's start today. Tomorrow. I will sleep for a while more. Lin Xiaola immediately closed her eyes and laid her head on the table. 20. What about here? Rinpoche helplessly took out a handful of white rabbit creamy candies. Yes. Lin Xiaola immediately opened her eyes wide. Teach me how to read first, Rinpoche said. Give me this first. Lin Xiaola didn't back down this time. I will give you 10 first. I will give you the rest after I finish learning today. Rinpoche continued to haggle like a hawker for a few candies. Chapter 66. The characters in this world were also pictograms. Even though they were different from Chinese characters and required a period of time to learn to write, it wasn't difficult to learn how to read. You just had to compare the characters in this world with Chinese characters. Knowing which characters to compare with saved a lot of effort. Rinpoche's main goal was to learn how to read and not write. Every time Lin Xiaola wrote a word, Rinpoche would compare it with his memory and write it twice. Then he nodded and said, "Got it next." Lin Xiaola was surprised that he learned 40 to 50 words in one afternoon. Have you really memorized them? Lin Xiaola asked curiously. Rinpoche found all the words that he had just written, pointed at them one by one and said, "This is Da, this is Yao, this is Her Majesty, this is Her Majesty." After saying them one by one, he folded his arms and looked at Lin Xiaola's slightly open mouth in surprise. A sense of pride arose spontaneously. At this rate, he would be able to learn most of the words in about 2 months. After all, there were only 3 to 2,000 commonly used Chinese characters. As long as he could learn 3 to 2,000 words, he would be able to say goodbye to being illiterate. At night, he told the Empress a story. The next day he took a handful of white rabbit creamy candies to learn from Lin Xiaola. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Rinpoche felt that Lin Xiaola's eyes were flickering when she looked at him. Could it be that she was shocked by my super-fast learning ability? Rinpoche was slightly pleased with himself. In any case, he graduated from university. Coming to this world and shocking a woman with his super-fast learning ability wasn't something to be proud of. At this point, Rinpoche calmed himself down and began to learn diligently. At night, he finally understood what Lin Xiaola's flickering eyes meant. The Empress was lying on the couch and elegantly took out a piece of white rabbit creamy candies from nowhere. At that time, Rinpoche's eyes almost popped out. How did this thing fall into the hands of the Empress? Lin Xiaola, that silly and adorable-looking fellow, actually sold him out? Although it was just a few pieces of candies, this thing wasn't available in Dayo. Rinpoche took out such a rare thing to bribe her but didn't offer it to the Empress. What would the Empress think? Rinpoche swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he watched the Empress remove the wrapper and place the milk candy in her mouth. He took 3 large steps forward and raised a handful of milk candy above his head. I have a gift for your Majesty. These are some milk candies that I have painstakingly obtained. Although they are not very precious, they are exquisitely made and taste sweet. I dare not keep them for myself, so I have specially come to offer them to your Majesty. Qing Yuan covered her mouth and chuckled as she took the handful of sweets away. The Empress looked at Rinpoche and said, "At least you know what's going on. What's this called?" "Milk candies." Rinpoche wiped off his sweat. Fortunately, he had brought more today. Sometimes he would also eat a piece. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy for him to get through tonight. "From now on, I'll give you 1 dough every month," the Empress said casually. "Yes," Rinpoche answered honestly with his head lowered. A bucket weighed more than 6 caddies. 1 bucket per month. Was this person eating candy like rice? In the future, the Empress would toss white rabbit creamy candy into her mouth before she fought with anyone. This didn't seem right. When he was talking about the investiture of the gods today, Rinpoche noticed that the Empress's mouth didn't seem to be idle. Every now and then she would put a white rabbit creamy candy into her mouth. Furthermore, looking at her expression, she seemed to be enjoying it. This made Rinpoche suddenly realize that this Empress had a special characteristic. She loved to eat sweets. Previously she loved to eat steamed pork and double scoop and the like. At this moment, Rinpoche felt that some of the Empress's gluttonous traits seemed to have awakened. He hoped that in the future she wouldn't find trouble with him when she had a toothache from eating candy. "You said that you are also proficient in poetry, right?" the Empress suddenly asked when he was about to leave after he finished his story. Without waiting for him to reply, she continued, "I remember now. Bright moonlight in front of the window, 2 pairs of shoes on the ground. Was this what you recited at that time? Damn it. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche finally knew why he was almost dragged out and beheaded when he first met her. It's a slip of the tongue, a slip of the tongue. Bright moonlight in front of the bed, suspected to be frost on the ground, 2 pairs of shoes on the ground. Rinpoche's forehead was full of sweat again. In a few days some people will be delivering gifts. When the time comes you will help to receive them, the Empress said coldly. Yes, Your Majesty. Rinpoche was slightly stunned. He didn't expect that he would be given such a task. However, he still hurriedly agreed to it. Following which, the Empress sat on the couch and frowned. Rinpoche had no choice but to wait for her. When the time comes, if there is someone, suppress their arrogance. If you do a good job you will be rewarded. After a while, the Empress's voice continued to be heard. If you lose the face of Dayo you should know the consequences. Rinpoche was puzzled. What did she skip at the beginning? If there is someone, suppress their arrogance? However, the latter part of the Empress's words made his heart tighten. He knew that the Empress in front of him was definitely not joking with him. He quickly raised his head and asked, Your Majesty, may I know who is coming? What's the matter? You will know when the time comes. I will get someone to inform you and arrange an identity for you. After the Empress finished speaking, she waved her hand and said, You may leave. After Rinpoche left the palace, his mind was still at a loss. What kind of person? Suppress their arrogance? It should be easy to receive them. The most troublesome thing was to suppress the other party's arrogance. From the Empress's tone, it seemed that she didn't like the people who came. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked him to suppress their arrogance. But who was the other party? What was his identity? How could he suppress them? Rinpoche had no idea about any of these. However, after combining the Empress's last sentence, Rinpoche understood something. In any case, he couldn't lose the face of Dayo. If he did so, he would definitely suffer. As for the rest, he had to understand what was going on first. After returning to the Beast Park, Rinpoche immediately went to look for Caretaker Sure. What's going to happen during this period of time? Rinpoche asked. Caretaker Sure was a little confused. He didn't understand what Rinpoche meant. Today, Her Majesty said that someone will be coming to deliver gifts during this period of time. Caretaker Sure pondered for a long time and counted with his fingers. Finally, he came to a realization and patted Rinpoche's shoulder. So, it's Her Majesty's birthday celebration. Ah. Every year, many people from Great Xia, the Yun Nation, and the Qin Nation will come to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday. Many of them are the sons of those so-called aristocratic families. However, their physiques are like little chicks. It's not enough for me to strangle them. Rinpoche felt that his physique was like that of a little chick. However, why are they coming to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday? Rinpoche was puzzled. If the officials from Great Xia, the Yun Nation, and the Qin Nation were here to deliver gifts, it would be understandable. However, what were those so-called aristocratic families doing here? Chapter 67. After hearing Caretaker Sure's explanation, Rinpoche immediately understood. Occupation, Empress. Strength, 7th in the world. Wealth, owns an entire nation. Appearance, fair skin, beautiful and alluring. Such a person, no matter where she was placed, would be a proper fair, rich and beautiful lady among fair, rich and beautiful ladies. It was very normal for people to have designs on the Empress. Therefore, every time the Empress celebrated her birthday, there would be many rich and powerful people from the other 3 nations rushing to Dayo. Every one of them was like livestock in heat, trying to get the Empress's attention. This was the only time they could come into contact with the Empress. Rinpoche also understood why the Empress asked him to help with the reception. After all, these people were here to deliver gifts. She couldn't possibly let them stay in an inn by themselves. She had to make some arrangements as the Empress still wanted to save face. However, even though this group of people were here to deliver gifts, some of them definitely annoyed the Empress. She had been wanting to slap them for a long time. For some reason, she didn't say much about this matter, so she skipped a sentence. However, her meaning was clear. No matter what, they couldn't embarrass Dayo. This sentence was more particular. How was this considered embarrassing Dayo? If the Aboriginals were to do this, they would probably talk about how big their fists were when they were talking about poems and songs. When they were talking about romance, they would compare whose legs were thicker. After all, it was the Empress's birthday celebration. They couldn't possibly be bruised and swollen. Therefore, a talent, like him who suddenly appeared in front of the Empress, was used as a substitute. She didn't care how good he was. In any case, it was like this every year. No matter how bad he was, he wouldn't be worse than the previous years. Therefore he simply put himself on the stage. Thinking about the people who might come, he reckoned that they were the elites of the younger generation. Those who weren't confident would definitely not come. The Empress actually asked him to suppress these people? Rinpoche felt that it would be good if he wasn't suppressed by them. If he was not careful, he would become a prop or a stepping stone for them to show off. In an instant, Rinpoche felt unwell. Thinking about the Empress's words, Rinpoche felt that if he really became a stepping stone, the Empress would make him a stepping stone for the rest of his life. Thinking about that, damn it, I will fight it out with them. Rinpoche's face was full of murderous intent. What are we fighting for? Caretaker sure raised his head blankly. When is Her Majesty's birthday celebration? Rinpoche asked. There's still one more month, probably? Caretaker sure replied uncertainly. Why did His Majesty mention this to you today? Her Majesty asked me to accompany her and receive her, Rinpoche said with a face full of resentment. Haha, let's welcome them then. Anyway, we just have to arrange a place for them to stay when they arrive, Caretaker sure said nonchalantly. Her Majesty also said that we can't disgrace Dayo. Rinpoche continued to look resentful. Isn't that simple? Beat up anyone who was dissatisfied with you. Beat up anyone who didn't like you. Beat up anyone who didn't like you. Just beat them up until they can't open their mouths. Caretaker sure laughed heartily. Rinpoche sighed faintly. This was indeed the style of the Aboriginals. Needless to say, he might really have to bring along 2 thugs when the time comes. In this world, Aboriginals weren't the only ones who could fight. If that Long Wanli didn't challenge the Empress that day, he reckoned that he could do whatever he wanted. Rinpoche greeted Caretaker sure and returned to his room. The 2 little chaps were hugging each other and sleeping soundly at the door. Rinpoche dove into his bed and started to ponder. Let's not talk about the background of the people who came this time. In any case, no matter how awesome they were, they definitely wouldn't be as awesome as Her Majesty. According to their individual standards, they could be divided into those who were outstanding in martial arts, literary talent, eloquence, and appearance. Those who were outstanding in martial arts seemed to be unpresentable. In any case, no matter how formidable they were, they wouldn't be as formidable as Her Majesty. In the entire world, there were only 6 people who were more formidable than her. He reckoned that these people wouldn't come. After all, experts had to maintain their status. It was even more impossible for them to think of robbing the cradle, right? As for those who were outstanding in literary talent, Her Majesty had specially mentioned poetry and songs previously. Judging from the Empress's words, the Empress probably wanted him to suppress these people. There weren't many cultured people in Dayo. Furthermore, this bunch of people still came over every year to show off their literary talent. The Empress was probably already very annoyed. Rinpoche thought that if a certain master's or PhD student came to his place every day to brag about their fields of expertise, his heart definitely wouldn't be filled with endless admiration like a torrential river. Instead, he would want to slap their faces with the soles of his shoes. He reckoned that the Empress had this kind of feeling. What was that saying again? When the monarch worries, his subjects worry. When the monarch is humiliated, his subjects die. Even though he was a successor to socialism in the 21st century, his immediate superior was the Empress. If the Empress wanted to slap their faces with the soles of her shoes, he would be the vanguard. After thinking it through, Rinpoche more or less had some confidence in himself. Even though the people he would be facing might be elites from various clans and other countries, he was still a university graduate. He couldn't possibly be inferior to a few elites from a feudal society. There was still some time left. Next time he would go back and memorize 300 Tang and Song poems. He didn't believe that the crystallization of the wisdom of the ancients couldn't defeat a few elites from a few clans. Even though he could also make their eyeballs pop out of their sockets when he competed with them in mathematics, the final result would probably be like a chicken talking to a duck. There wasn't much meaning to it. The next day Rinpoche arrived at Qingxin Palace Hall. After seeing Lin Xiaola, he had a look of hidden bitterness on his face. He was wondering if he should bring her poop-flavored chocolate or chocolate-flavored poop next time. Why are you looking at me like that? Lin Xiaola asked unnaturally when she saw Rinpoche's resentful gaze. Rinpoche thought for a while and didn't say anything. After all, as a man he couldn't be calculative with a little girl. It would give people the impression that he was narrow-minded. Even though he was indeed narrow-minded. He decided to bring her chocolate-flavored poop. The other party wasn't a fool. She probably wouldn't eat poop-flavored chocolate. Let's continue. Ren Baqin pulled a stool over and sat directly opposite her. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Lin Xiaola heaved a sigh of relief. She was still a little nervous just now, even though she felt that this feeling was very baffling. Ren Baqin spent the entire afternoon learning a few dozen words. At the end of the lesson he also reviewed what he learned yesterday. Seeing that he hadn't forgotten anything, Ren Baqin immediately felt very satisfied. At night, he went to the palace to tell a story as usual. At the same time he gave the Empress a bag of white rabbit creamy candy. This made the Empress rather satisfied. She felt that Ren Baqin was rather tactful and found him increasingly pleasing to the eye. It wouldn't be a problem for a bunch of burly men in the imperial court to lead troops into battle. However, it would be difficult for them to be tactful and tactful. Following the birth of Neza, the evisceration of his father, the lotus incarnation, Jianghu's descent from the mountain, and the burning of the Pipa spirit, the story became more and more exciting. Even the Empress rarely interrupted him. Instead, she concentrated on listening to the story. From time to time she would put a piece of white rabbit creamy candy in her mouth. One person told the story while the other three listened. Sometimes the fire in the palace flickered due to the wind. Ren Baqin suddenly felt that this kind of atmosphere was a little suitable for telling a ghost story. However, when he thought about the Empress's fighting strength, Ren Baqin felt that it was better to forget this idea as soon as possible. If other women were to listen to a ghost story, they might become a helpless little bird. If the Empress wasn't afraid while listening to a ghost story, it would be fine. If she was really afraid, she would give him a slap. Next year today would be his death anniversary. That night, the story of the investiture of the gods was told a little later than usual. Since the Empress didn't say anything, Ren Baqin told it all the way until Bo Yikao went to Jianghu to pay tribute and was sent to prison. Only then was he released by the Empress. The next morning Ren Baqin dragged Teng Hulu and Tai Dao out for a walk. After returning home tonight, it would be Qin Qing's engagement day. He wanted to see if there were any good things to buy as a gift. Although he already knew that Dayo was lacking in supplies, after visiting a few shops on Jingyang Street, he realized that it was far more lacking than he thought. Most of the things sold in the shops were refined rice, refined flour, wine, salt, cloth, and other necessities. Furthermore, the prices weren't low. There were also a few shops that sold brightly colored cloth, silk, satin, exquisite porcelain, and the like. The prices could make Ren Baqin spurt blood. Originally, Ren Baqin wanted to choose a gift for Qin Qing here. In the end, after walking around for a long time, he still couldn't find anything suitable. Chapter 68. When he woke up again, it was already early in the morning. Looking at the sky that was just starting to brighten, Ren Baqin lay in bed for a long time before getting up. Today was Qin Qing's engagement day. No matter what, he had to make a trip there. The two work suits in the wardrobe could no longer be worn. Ren Baqin measured his body size and realized that he had gained at least 10 kilograms recently. Originally, he was around 120 kilograms, but now he was at least 130 kilograms. His meals were all meat from morning to night. It would be strange if he didn't get fat. On Earth, Ren Baqin's physique was just right. However, in Dayo, according to caretaker Shi, he was as thin and weak as a chicken. He casually put on some clothes and went out for breakfast. Then he went to buy a blue suit which cost him a few thousand yuan. It was not very expensive, but it was quite suitable for him. After that, he gave Qin Qing a call to ask about the engagement date. When he found out that it was night time, Ren Baqin ran to the supermarket and bought a huge pile of white rabbit creamy candies and various kinds of chocolates, including 15 kilograms of white rabbit creamy candies and various kinds of chocolates. He spent about 2,000 yuan. After stuffing these things into the trunk, Ren Baqin went to buy 300 poems of the Tang dynasty and 300 poems of the Song dynasty. Since the Empress had personally instructed him to do so, he didn't dare to be careless. He planned to memorize it and see if anyone dared to act pretentiously, he would rebuke them. After sending everything home, Ren Baqin lay on the sofa and groaned. He felt that the sofa on Earth was much more comfortable than the stool in that world. It was extremely hard. If he wanted to make a sofa, he would have to wait for some time for the leather to be tanned. Looking at the time, it would take another 8 to 10 days. At that time, he would send a set to the Empress and then make a long set to put in his room. That way he would have a place to lie down at night. After lying on the sofa for a while, he got up to charge the electric baton and uploaded the photos to his computer. Then he registered a new Weibo account called Starting from Zero and uploaded the photos of Tian and Gun. Some were sleeping, some were fooling around, some were throwing a tantrum, and some were hugging his thighs. There were 20 to 30 pictures in a row. After that, he selected a few photos of the Beast Park that he felt were pretty good and uploaded them. Regardless of whether or not anyone paid attention to this Weibo post, it was still a record of his time in the other world. After doing all these, Rinpoche took out 300 poems of the Tang dynasty and started to recite it. If he wanted to follow the Empress's instructions and use the soles of his shoes to slap people's faces, he had to first memorize it thoroughly. A month's time was neither long nor short. 3 days in the real world was equivalent to 1 day in the other world. In the other world he could return 6 or 7 times a month. The time in the two worlds added together was about 1.5 months. But time was still tight. He had to work hard to show off and slap faces. Wait a minute, did he remember something wrong? Suddenly, a thought flashed across Rinpoche's mind. Something seemed to be amiss. First, the Empress's birthday was in a month's time. Caretaker Shi's estimate was just about right. Secondly, the feudal society was not like the modern society. At that time, transportation was not developed. Ordinary people would not be far from home for their entire lives. A long journey would easily take 10 days to half a month, and they would not even be in the same country. For a big event like the Empress's birthday, they would definitely set off in advance. As such, there was an 80% chance that they would arrive in advance as well. It would be normal for them to arrive 10 days or even half a month earlier. There was not much time left for Rinpoche. If there were people who would arrive a month earlier, Rinpoche was afraid that he would have to go into battle immediately. This was not just a matter of urgency, it was simply a matter of life and death. At the thought of this, Rinpoche immediately jumped up from the sofa. He held onto a book and memorized it by rote for the entire afternoon. He had never worked so hard even when he was in school. This level of hard work could only be compared to the college entrance examination. After half a day, Rinpoche felt dizzy and put down the book. After resting for a while, he changed his clothes and headed to the hotel where Qin and Jiang were getting engaged. When he reached the entrance, he saw Qin in a red suit and Jiang in a red dress. Both of them were standing at the entrance to welcome the guests. Qin came from a wealthy family. Even though Jiang family was not as wealthy, her parents were both professors and could be considered as a scholarly family. Both of them stood there. They were indeed a talented couple. Yes, as mentioned previously, Jiang was not considered beautiful, but she had an exceptionally attractive intellectual and tranquil charm. Upon seeing Rinpoche, Qin laughed heartily and came over to give him a hug. The present is me. You have everything that I have and everything that I don't. Rinpoche spread his hands and said. He really did not think of anything to give to Qin. You are very secretive now. It's good that you are here. Qin smiled and patted his shoulder. Rinpoche grimaced in pain. Qin did not use much strength, but his shoulder had been patted by Caretaker Shi a few times and was already bruised. Congratulations, Jiang. Rinpoche greeted Jiang again. I finally get to see the two of you. Jiang face was filled with happiness. She pursed her lips and smiled, thank you. However, I have not seen you for a while. I've been very busy recently, you know that. Rinpoche spread his hands and joked. Busy eating? You have gained so much weight. Rinpoche laughed heartily. After greeting the two of them, Rinpoche was brought inside and arranged to sit at a table next to the main table. The two families did not organize the engagement too extravagantly. It was just about 4 to 5 tables of relatives and friends who had a good relationship with each other. Shaoran, you're here. Qin's father greeted him when he saw him. Uncle. Call me Bachien. Otherwise it sounds like you are scolding me. Rinpoche said helplessly. This caused Qin's father to laugh heartily. However, it was, after all, an engagement banquet for both parties. There was no time for him to entertain Rinpoche. Father Chen's main focus was on greeting Jiang family and getting to know them better. Rinpoche sipped his tea at the side. In his mind, he was silently reciting the 300 Tang poems that he had memorized in the afternoon to deepen his memory. Following which, Rinpoche was in a daze. Occasionally he would come back to his senses and look at Qin and Jiang joyful faces. He wished them well in his heart. After attending the engagement banquet, Rinpoche thought about how his mother almost made him go on a blind date 2 days ago. He shook his head slightly. If his situation did not change, he would not be able to find a girlfriend. When he walked out of the hotel, Rinpoche shrunk his neck as the wind blew at him. The weather was indeed cold. He quickly got into the car and switched on the air conditioner. After a while he felt a little warmer. After driving home, he turned on his computer and took a look at his newly registered Weibo account. Even though it did not matter if anyone noticed this Weibo account, he still hoped that some people would see it and follow it. After all, it was his footprints from another world. After logging into his account, Rinpoche saw that there were hundreds of likes and more than 10 comments. He was somewhat happy. He opened up the comments and browsed through them. Almost all of them were asking if he was working at a zoo or which zoo he was in. There were only 2 comments that said that the scenery was pretty good. They asked where he was and wanted to take a look. Sure enough, national treasures were the most attractive. The next day Rinpoche memorized books for the whole day. In the afternoon he felt dizzy and his brain was like a lump of paste. He threw the books aside and went downstairs to drive around. He could relax a little. He wandered around the city aimlessly. When he passed by a corner, he saw a plainly dressed girl walking in front of him with many bags. He sighed in his heart. A few months ago he was also struggling to survive in the city like this. He didn't drive very fast. When he passed by, he turned his head to take a look. She looked pretty. The next second he felt that she looked familiar. He pondered for a while and couldn't match the person in his memory. He noticed a red hearing aid on her ear and suddenly remembered who she was. Chapter 69. Rinpoche looked at her walking by the roadside with her bags. It seemed like she was going to move or go to the train station. He felt a little sympathy for her. After all, he used to be like her. He knew that it wasn't easy for a young person to survive in this city, let alone a disabled girl. Rinpoche had nothing to do and met this girl who gave him a good impression. He stopped the car not far away, opened the door and walked to the back of the car. "Do you remember me?" Rinpoche walked in front of the girl and asked loudly. He didn't know how loud he should be for the girl to hear him. "Last time at a restaurant, a classmate of mine drank too much." He suddenly jumped out like a robber and the girl was shocked. After seeing the person in front of her, she recalled carefully and showed a look of sudden realization. "Do you need help?" Rinpoche saw her expression and knew that she remembered him. The girl put the luggage she was carrying on the ground, took out a small notebook from her pocket and wrote, "I remember, thank you. Do you need help?" Rinpoche pointed at the luggage again. "Where are you going?" "I can do it myself, thank you," the girl wrote. "Are you going home? To the station?" "I lost my job and changed my residence. I used to live in a dormitory." Rinpoche was slightly stunned. He didn't expect her to not live there anymore. Although it wasn't difficult for ordinary people to find a job, it was much more difficult for her. After all, not all bosses would accept a disabled person in their shop. But thinking about it, she should have some support groups for the disabled, such as WeChat groups, to help her find a job. "Where do you live? Let me send you there? Consider it an apology for my classmate's rudeness. Anyway, I have nothing to do and am wandering around." Rinpoche was telling the truth. He really had nothing to do now. During the day he had memorized Tang poems. Now he was wandering around aimlessly. He was completely out to relax. The girl showed a distressed expression. It was indeed difficult for her to carry these things. Although the place she wanted to go wasn't far, it wasn't near either. It's hard to get a taxi in this area. Seeing her expression, Rinpoche picked up one of her luggage and said, "Don't worry, I don't have any bad intentions. I just want to apologize for what happened last time. Since I have nothing to do, I will help you if I can. Looking at the things you're carrying, it shouldn't be too far. It won't take me much effort." Seeing this, the girl finally nodded. After getting into the car, she flipped open a thank you message and showed it to him. Rinpoche waved his hand. "Which way?" The girl wrote down an address. Rinpoche took a look at it and entered it into the navigation system. It wasn't too far away. If he were to walk, it would be about 1 kilometer. However, it would indeed be somewhat troublesome to carry these things. "Have you found a new job?" Rinpoche asked. "We will find it soon," the girl wrote. From her words, Rinpoche could feel her drive. "I'm sorry, what's your name?" Rinpoche asked apologetically. The waiter did call his name before, but he had forgotten about it. "Anfi." "Very nice," Rinpoche casually praised. Anfi went back to the thank you card. She seemed to have written some common phrases on a piece of paper. Each piece of paper was a word, and when needed, she could just use it. The place that Anfi went to was a relatively old neighborhood. The rubbish bin in the courtyard seemed to have been left uncleaned for 2 days. After sending her downstairs, Anfi wrote on a piece of paper, "Thank you. When I find a new job I will treat you to a meal. Can you give me your phone number?" Ren Baqin smiled and wrote his phone number on the paper. Then he watched her walk into the corridor. He sat in the car and stared blankly for a while. He felt that he had changed a lot recently. If it was in the past, he definitely wouldn't have done such a thing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been immersed in his own world after attending school for so many years. He didn't even have a single friend. After coming out for a stroll, he was more or less relaxed. He found a place to have a meal and went back to memorize. When he opened his eyes and saw the familiar wooden beam, Rinpoche shook his head and sat up. He was still holding the book, 300 Poems of the Tang Dynasty. Even though he had slept, his brain was still a little numb. He felt that if he continued to memorize, he would become a fool. It was better to go out and play with Gun Gun and Tian Tian. Beside him was a bag filled with white rabbit creamy candies, chocolate and stun batons. After stuffing 2 stun batons into his waist, Rinpoche felt that he had regained the vigor of a Jedi. From today onwards, I will continue to work hard to slap people with the soles of my shoes in the morning, learn to read in the afternoon, and tell stories to His Majesty at night. After thinking about the things that he had to do every day, Rinpoche pushed open the door and picked up 2 pandas who were sleeping soundly. He swung his sword around like a storm before he finally put down the 2 fellows whose eyes were emitting stars. Once Tian Tian and Gun Gun landed on the ground, they stumbled and wanted to find Rinpoche to take revenge. In the end, one of them stumbled and knocked into the door frame, while the other stumbled and fell from the stone floor. They rolled and rolled on the ground. Rinpoche quickly raised his camera and took a photo of their silly and adorable behavior. When he was eating breakfast, Rinpoche suddenly remembered that the fans should be ready. He went out with Teng Hulu and Tai Dao. When he came back, the 2 of them each carried 10 fans. He threw them to Tong Jia and asked him to make the outer box the same way as the previous time. As for the color, there was no need for it. It was not as troublesome as the previous time. Anyway, there was no competition for this thing. He could sell it however he wanted as long as it was useful. If the things he sold were more exquisite than the ones he gave to the Empress, then he would be asking for trouble. "Brother, I've brought back your sect's secret treasure." Just as Rinpoche was in a daze, he heard Caretaker Shi's voice. He turned around and saw Caretaker Shi, whose face had yet to recover, tossing an electric baton up and down in his hand. He had a complacent look on his face. Rinpoche didn't even need to think to know that this thing was definitely out of battery again. Otherwise, with Caretaker Shi's martial prowess, he would definitely not be able to retrieve it. Rinpoche reached out and took the electric baton. He was afraid that Rinpoche would mention the electric baton again, so he diverted his attention and asked, "How's the shop on Jianghu Road? I put up the sign yesterday but I couldn't find you. Our shaved ice shop's reputation has spread out recently. We didn't do it outside like we did in the beginning. Many people came in after we put up the sign." As expected, Caretaker Shi was in high spirits when he mentioned this. Then he grinned and stretched out his 5 fingers happily. "Just like you said, I tripled the price for foreigners. 15 copper coins a bowl. They had plenty of money anyway. Hey, look at their faces. I haven't felt so carefree in a long time." Chapter 70. In the afternoon, Rinpoche was learning calligraphy from Lin Xiaola in Qingxin Palace Hall when he heard footsteps approaching. It sounded like there were quite a few people. He got up and walked to the entrance of the palace hall. The Empress, who was dressed in red, brought 2 palace maids and an imperial guard named Xinjia. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Rinpoche quickly bowed. Upon hearing his voice, Lin Xiaola immediately scuttled out from behind the table, bounced to the Empress's side and greeted, "Your Majesty." "Yes." The Empress's expression became much gentler when she saw Lin Xiaola. Rinpoche was speechless. Lin Xiaola actually hid her skills so well. No wonder she was able to become a librarian at such a young age. No wonder she gave the milk candy to the Empress as a gift. Although he didn't know what their relationship was, they seemed to be familiar with each other from their expressions. The Empress walked past him with her entourage. Rinpoche smelled a delicate fragrance and followed them obediently. Upon entering the palace hall, the Empress saw a pen and paper on the table with half-written words. "Are you practicing calligraphy? I wasn't familiar with Dayo's language previously." "I'm learning Dayo's language," Rinpoche explained from behind. The Empress nodded her head. "As the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, you naturally need to be literate. If those fellows in the imperial court could do the same, it would save her a lot of trouble. How's your learning? The Empress picked up the piece of paper with Ren Baqian's scrawled handwriting and looked at it. Ren Baqian's handwriting made her reminisce. When she was 3 years old, her handwriting should be like this too. It should be better than this. In another 2 months, I should be able to read most of the words, Ren Baqian replied. He was talking about reading, not writing. Even though he had to write every word a few times, it was to deepen his memory. He would forget most of it in no time. Writing still had to be practiced slowly in the future. The Empress nodded her head and didn't say anything else. She continued to lead the entourage in. Ren Baqian carefully followed behind and went straight to the second floor. After being here for so many days, this was the first time he went up to the second floor. What surprised him the most was that there was actually an old lady with white hair and a beard in an official's robe guarding the second floor. He had never seen her come down during these few days. He also didn't hear any sound from upstairs and thought that there was no one here. Greetings, Your Majesty. What books are you looking for? The old woman stood up and smiled at the Empress. Supervisor Lin, how's your health recently? The Empress asked. I'm fine. It's been a long time since I've had my old illness. Supervisor Lin coughed lightly after she finished speaking. Ren Baqian looked at him with disdain and said, You're still pretending, keep pretending. I've been here for so long, yet you haven't moved at all like a ghost. You're already coughing the moment the Empress comes. But his surname is Lin? Could Lin Xiaola be her daughter or granddaughter? One is a librarian and the other is a librarian. Are they preparing for their daughter to inherit the family inheritance? Ren Baqian glanced at Lin Xiaola. On the other side, the Empress said warmly, Supervisor Lin, you still have to take care of your health. Exenge, send 3 tails of red snake seed and 5 stalks of 100 core grass from the medicine storehouse in a while. Yes. I'm here to look for the record of Dongxian. I suddenly feel like flipping through it, the Empress said. I'm going to get it for Her Majesty, Librarian Lin bowed and said. Then she walked toward the inside with her hunched body. I also want to see if there's anything else that I'm interested in, the Empress said again. Librarian Lin stopped in her tracks and made a pleased gesture. Ren Baqian looked at the Empress moving forward again. He didn't know whether he should follow her or not. Seeing that the others had already left, he followed behind. Speaking of which, he was also very curious about the difference between the books on the second floor and the first floor. According to common sense, the books on the second floor should be more precious than the ones on the first floor. The second floor was also filled with rooms. Every room was about the same size as the one below. However, one couldn't see what was inside. There was a layer of soft paper between the grids on the door, and nothing could be seen inside. Your Majesty, it's here. When they reached the third last door, Librarian Lin stopped in her tracks and pushed open the door beside her. The Empress went in, followed by Librarian Lin. After that, Xianjia stood at the door. Ren Baqian didn't even see what was inside. At the same time, he was even more curious. It was so well guarded. What exactly was inside? The record of Dongxian? A martial arts secret manual of this world? Ren Baqian felt that it was highly possible. This name didn't sound as common as 300 Poems of the Tang Dynasty. Furthermore, the Empress's martial arts was so high that it was reasonable for her to read martial arts secret manuals. Ren Baqian stood obediently at the door. Occasionally he raised his head and looked around, wondering when the Empress would come out. Coincidentally, he saw Lin Xiaola not far away from him. He immediately grinned and almost laughed out loud. He saw Lin Xiaola standing there, swaying, and her eyes were already closed. An ordinary person would never think that she was actually asleep just by looking at the extent of her swaying. This kind of ability to sleep while standing definitely wasn't something an ordinary person could compare with. Ren Baqian had to admit that the temptation of the white rabbit creamy candy was indeed not small. It actually made Lin Xiaola take time out of her busy sleep to teach Ren Baqian how to read. For a person who could sleep while standing here waiting for her superior, an ordinary person definitely wouldn't know how much she craved sleep. Perhaps lying in bed and sleeping till the end of time was the best ending for her. Bang! Ren Baqian looked up and indeed, Lin Xiaola's head had knocked into the wooden wall beside her. He lowered his head and made a laughing gesture. Not only him, but Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan also covered their mouths and laughed softly. It seemed that the two of them already knew about Lin Xiaola's situation. What happened? The Empress's voice came from inside the room. Nothing, I accidentally knocked into the wall. Lin Xiaola covered her head and quickly answered. She was angry for a long time before she rubbed her head and put her hand down. Not long after, she started to sway again. Rinpoche thought for a while and felt that Lin Shaola might be sick. He remembered seeing on the news that there was a girl who had a strange illness and could only sleep 18 to 20 hours a day. She couldn't even work normally. Lin Shaola might be this kind of person. However, her illness wasn't as serious as the other parties. Only those who had nothing to do would feel sleepy and unable to resist it. Usually she would still be able to wake up if there was a sound. Or if there was something to do, she could still force herself to stay awake. After waiting for a while, the door opened again. The Empress and Librarian Lin walked out one after another. The moment the two of them came out, Lin Shaola quickly widened her eyes as if she was glaring at someone. Soon after, she slowly calmed down and yawned. Rinpoche took a glance and saw the Empress coming out with 2 books in her hands. She glanced at Rinpoche indifferently and asked him to stand up straight. After sending the Empress out of the hall, Rinpoche and Lin Shaola returned to the hall. Librarian Lin didn't come down from upstairs and only sent them to the staircase. "Are you really that sleepy?" Rinpoche asked Lin Shaola curiously. A normal person could only sleep 8 hours a day. Even if they slept too much, they couldn't fall asleep even if they wanted to. He really couldn't understand how the other party could sleep so much. "I'm all right," Lin Shaola said listlessly as she lay on the table. Looking at her appearance, Rinpoche felt that it was rather amusing. He casually threw a piece of Dove chocolate on the table. "Try it, it's on you." Just as the chocolate flew out, Lin Shaola caught it in her hands like an invisible hand. After removing the wrapper, Lin Shaola carefully took a bite. Then, like a hamster, she ate it in 2 or 3 bites and looked at Rinpoche with sparkling eyes. Rinpoche had a kind smile on his face. He thought that if he made chocolate-flavored feces, she would really eat it. A gentleman's revenge is never too late. Chapter 71. Rinpoche did not learn for long before the imperial guard named Xenja brought the medicine to the 2nd floor. After she came down, she pointed at Rinpoche and said, "Follow me to see Her Majesty." He pushed the pen and paper to the side, got up and followed Xenja. Behind him, Lin Shaola was fuming as she looked at his back view. After snorting twice, she reluctantly put away the pen and paper. For the sake of Rinpoche's white rabbit creamy candies every day. The familiar path was the same palace that he always went to. After entering, he found that a burly man in an official uniform was already standing inside. However, it was a little different from his own. The main body was black with a beast pattern on it, and the collar was yellow. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Rinpoche stopped 1 step behind that person and bowed. That burly man turned his head to look at Rinpoche and asked with a grin, "Your Majesty, is this the guy?" "This is the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall. This time he will accompany you in receiving those people." The cold voice of the Empress came from above. "That's good. I think those people are already very annoyed. All of them don't have much ability and are a bunch of fart. If it weren't for the fact that they came to give gifts, they would have already cut off their heads and kicked them like a ball." The big man laughed loudly. "Rinpoche, this is the Honglu Vice Minister. From tomorrow onwards you can report to him. You don't have to go to Qingxin Palace Hall for the time being. As for the position, it would be in the Honglu Bureau." "Gudaxiong, are there any vacant positions?" the Empress asked from above. It had to be said that Gudaxiong really lived up to his name. He looked like a bear with a huge body and a face full of stubble like a human bear. Rinpoche lowered his head. He knew about the Honglu Bureau, which was responsible for external reception and various etiquettes. It was equivalent to a foreign affairs department. Since he was responsible for the reception of those people, it was perfectly justifiable for him to have his name in this department. Honglu Junior official Gu Daxiong pondered for a moment before suggesting, "Why not we take up the position of Honglu deputy? I remember that seat isn't empty, right?" the Empress asked. "I'll go back and give him a vacation. Anyway, he wants to quit long ago." Gu Daxiong grinned. Rinpoche was speechless as he listened from the side. There was actually such an operation? What an eye-opener. "He's called Qiji? I remember that he broke the legs of 4 people from the Yun Nation last year, and one of them even complained to me. So be it." The Empress's voice was heard, and both of them bowed in agreement. "How about this? If there's nothing else, you can leave." After the Empress finished speaking lazily, Qing Yuan, who was at the side, served a plate of grapes. The Empress plucked one and placed it in her mouth. "This subject shall take his leave." After Gu Daxiong finished speaking, he retreated. Before he left, He grinned at Rinpoche, revealing a mouthful of snow-white teeth that glistened under the illumination of the lights in the hall. Come forward and continue your story. The Empress reclined on the couch. Her eyes were painted red, and her lips were as red as blood. When she plucked a grape and placed it in her mouth, her actions were extremely moving and made one's heart tremble. Rinpoche hurriedly lowered his head after taking a glance. He was so close to sticking his head into the ground. Oh, storyteller Rin, raise your head and look straight at me. Why are you lowering your head? The Empress chuckled, looking languid and unrestrained. Rinpoche raised his head to take a glance and almost lowered his head again. Normally the Empress was still fine. Even though she was beautiful, she was too cold and could only be observed from afar. However, today she was lying on the couch, wearing a red muslin, looking languid and charming. Her posture as she gently placed the grape in her mouth made him feel like he was being teased. He coughed awkwardly and said, "Your Majesty's beauty is unparalleled in the world, like the bright sun in the sky. I feel ashamed of my inferiority and find it hard to look straight at you." Unparalleled in the world? The Empress asked. Yes, no one in the world can compare to you. Rinpoche lowered his head and replied. The celebrities on Earth were seen on TV every day. In terms of appearance they were similar, but their identities were different. This was the monarch of a nation. That kind of excitement made Rinpoche's heart jump up and down. If he were to jump any further, his heart would jump out. You really know how to talk, the Empress said with a smile. Tell me about investiture of the gods. The story of your nation is indeed interesting. Yes. Rinpoche hurriedly responded. He opened his mouth for a long time and finally calmed himself down before he began to narrate the story. He only stopped when he reached the part where Baigan dug out his heart. According to usual practice, he should have stopped at this time. The lamp oil in the hall had been refilled several times. Tell me another part. I don't feel comfortable if I stop here, the Empress suddenly said. Rinpoche didn't expect the Empress to speak at this time. Today the Empress was much more human than usual and less cold. He hurriedly nodded his head in response. Fortunately, he had completed Investiture of the Gods. If he were to read those web novels where chapters were missing, he would probably be in trouble. He narrated until Grand Tutor went to the East Sea to quell the chaos. Finally he said, if you want to know the outcome, listen to the next chapter. After finishing the story in one breath, he felt refreshed and could finally get off work. Then he wanted to give himself a slap. Did he really think of himself as a storyteller? What he was doing was just a matter of missing chapters. Sure enough, these were all passed down from generation to generation. Those web novels were just copying the wisdom of the ancient people. He looked up at the Empress and saw her squinting at him. She had no intention of speaking. Rinpoche continued to narrate until Ji Chang went to fetch Zhong City. The Empress then stood up and said, "It's late, you can go now. For the next few days just prepare for the Honglu Bureau. Also, make a few trips to the Imperial Kitchen when you are free. Teach them a few Chinese dishes for the banquet." Rinpoche bowed and asked, "Your Majesty, how are the arrangements for the banquet? What does your Majesty want?" "What do you mean?" The Empress was slightly puzzled. In China, there are delicious dishes of color and fragrance. There are also some dishes that taste good but aren't in good condition, making it hard for people to eat. There are also some dishes that are only suitable for specific people, for example, especially spicy dishes, Rinpoche said softly. This was what he suddenly thought of after the Empress spoke. The Empress didn't like those people. She even wanted him to be the vanguard to criticize them. Whether they could eat the banquet would depend on the mood of the Empress in front of him. Rinpoche felt that he was getting better at playing the role of a lackey. This is interesting. The Empress laughed. Let's see who it is. But have you prepared the toffee? It's ready. Shall I send it to the palace tomorrow? Rinpoche quickly asked. No need. You go ahead with other matters. I will get someone to fetch it tomorrow morning. Rinpoche bowed and took his leave. After leaving the palace, Rinpoche recalled what happened just now and felt that he was a little too bold. He actually recklessly guessed the Empress's intentions and even pointed it out. But it didn't look too bad. Chapter 72. Early the next morning, Rinpoche was awakened by a knock on his door. When he opened the door, he saw a delicate face. It was actually Qing Yuan. She was standing outside the door with two guards nearby. His toes were still teasing Tian Tian and Gun Gun, who were rolling around on the side. Greetings, Miss Qing Yuan. Rinpoche cupped his hands in greeting. He didn't know what to call it either. After all, the people in the imperial palace in ancient China were all eunuchs, so it was easier to address them. But those movies and television dramas didn't mention how to address the palace maids. He reckoned that Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were definitely of a higher grade than him. He thought for a moment and decided to just call her Mississippi. In any case, even if it was wrong, the other party wouldn't be able to find anything wrong with it. Qing Yuan stood up and smiled. When she saw Ren Baqin, she wasn't unfamiliar with him. After all, she saw him every day. Furthermore, as the Empress's person, she was clear about some of the Empress's thoughts. She knew that Ren Baqin might be put in an important position in the future. After all, he knew a lot of things and could speak well. He was a talent. Storyteller Ren, where's the thing for Her Majesty? Qing Yuan laughed. Ren Baqin hurriedly returned to the house, took out the bag and handed it to Qing Yuan. At the same time, he stuffed a small bag that weighed about half a kilo into her hands. Here they are. Other than milk candies, there are other things. They were specially prepared for Your Majesty. As for this, it's for Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, Ren Baqin said. He had just packed the bag when he went back, and there were still some bags left in the house after going back and forth a few times. With Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan's status, they probably didn't lack money. Maids and female officials weren't as eager to make money as eunuchs, especially with their status. I might as well put half a caddy of White Rabbit creamy candies in it. This thing can be used as a stepping stone in the palace. Currently, it has been successful. Qing Yuan's eyes curved. No wonder His Majesty thinks so highly of him. He is indeed an exquisite person. Thank you for your praise. I don't deserve it. Ren Baqin cupped his hands in obeisance. In that case, I shall not disturb you any further. Her Majesty is still waiting in the palace. Qing Yuan waved a small bag at Ren Baqin before turning around and leaving. Not long after, he handed the bag for His Majesty to the Imperial Guard and held the small bag behind his back. Looking up at the sky, he estimated that it was about 7 o'clock. Ren Baqin suddenly felt that he should get the watch back. At least he could look at the time. If this thing was sold, it should be able to fetch a high price, but the source of the goods was hard to say. Even though the Empress knew some things about him, he couldn't let others suspect him anymore. After all, she was the ruler of a nation and the 7th most powerful expert in the world. Her magnanimity was far beyond that of an ordinary person. Other people might not be as broad-minded as the Empress. If someone wanted to know his secret, he would be in trouble. It was better to get the mechanical blueprint of the clock and find someone to make it. More sophisticated processing equipment was not difficult to obtain. At most, he would wear one watch and give one to the Empress. He went to the kitchen and took a look around. When he saw that there was vegetable soup, he scooped a bowl of it and ate it together with some other grains. After that, he changed his clothes and brought Teng Hulu and Tai Dao to the Honglu Bureau. The Honglu Bureau was located in the Pearl Curtain district, not far from the Beihong district. Along the way they did not encounter any fights. However, when they arrived at the Pearl Curtain district, they met a few people from the Public Order Bureau who were pushing a few badly battered people. It seemed like they were going to be whipped for fighting. One of the burly men from the Public Order Bureau was slightly stunned when he saw Ren Baqin. Following which, he sized him up carefully, called out to the others and walked towards Ren Baqin. Ren Baqin? Ren Baqin smiled bitterly and nodded his head. Needless to say, he was definitely one of the 8 people who were beaten up by caretaker Shi. Did you give the thing to that bastard Shi Wanshan? That burly man's face immediately became unfriendly. I was robbed, I'm innocent. Ren Baqin said helplessly. Can you use the secret treasure of your sect? Lend it to me. Otherwise, let's draw a circle, that burly man shouted. Ren Baqin felt Teng Hulu and Tai Dao behind him take a step forward. He was satisfied. It was worth it to have these 2 underlings. In any case, it was enough for them to stand up for him when he was in trouble. He waved his hand behind him. Now that I'm the Honglu deputy, I can choose not to accept your challenge. Ren Baqin smiled casually. According to his understanding, the Honglu deputy should have a higher position than this burly man. He could choose not to accept the challenge just because his position was higher. It was fine if he was bullied by the Empress, but caretaker Shi was on good terms with him. Ren Baqin couldn't bully everyone. There's such a thing? That bastard Shi Wanshan didn't mention it before? Aren't you from the Beast Park? That burly man scratched his head in confusion. Ren Baqin cupped his hands and said, I'm about to report to the Honglu deputy. You are the first outsider to take up an official position in Dayo. Forget it, your position is higher than mine. That burly man looked at Ren Baqin and grinned. He didn't seem to mind at all, waved his hand at him and left. Rinpoche looked at his back and shook his head slightly. This person wasn't bad. He was similar to the aboriginal men that Rinpoche had met before, but a little vulgar. However, from his attitude, Rinpoche could tell that if he didn't have an official position in Dayo, it would be difficult for him to do anything. The aboriginals weren't polite to outsiders. He shouldn't even think about being a wealthy man. Unless he went to another country, but it wouldn't necessarily be a good outcome. Therefore, it was better to cozy up to the Empress in the future. Based on his experience in the Beast Park and the palace, the Dayo people weren't averse to becoming one of their own after holding a position or official position. Regardless of whether it was caretaker Sure or a few other caretakers or even the odd job workers and their family members, they were all the same. It was the same for some of the people he met in the palace. Let's go. Rinpoche gestured for the two people behind him to head to the Honglu deputy. Outside the Honglu deputy was a huge courtyard with a few tall buildings. From the main gate, one could see that there was a passageway leading to the back of the building. The two burly men at the entrance were dressed differently from the palace guards and the people from the Public Order Bureau that Rinpoche had seen just now. It was a sleeveless shirt, revealing two thick, muscular arms. In addition, the two of them had ferocious faces and murderous eyes, which made it impossible for strangers to approach them. If one didn't know better, they would have thought that they were in prison. In a normal diplomatic department, wouldn't they find a few good-natured people who were easy to deal with? However, Dayo had specially placed two fiendish-looking men to guard the entrance. They couldn't wait to keep everyone out. They were simply a weirdo in the diplomatic department. This is the Honglu deputy. What's the matter? One of them stopped Rinpoche and said fiercely, "Look for Gu Shaoqing. Tell him that Rinpoche is here to report," Rinpoche said. "Report?" That person sized up Rinpoche suspiciously. "Wait a minute." The other person turned and entered the courtyard. Rinpoche felt that he should have worn his official robes. Originally, he thought that there was no need to wear the official robes of the palace since he was here to report to the Honglu deputy. He didn't expect that there would be trouble everywhere. Previously, he didn't feel it when he was walking in the city. Today he really felt it. Not long after, that person came out and said, "Go in, Sir Gu is waiting for you." Chapter 73. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he was greeted by a burly man with bell-like eyes and short stubble. He grabbed Rinpoche's shoulder and asked, "Are you Rinpoche?" Rinpoche nodded. "I will depend on you in the future." The burly man grabbed Rinpoche's shoulders and shook him back and forth. For some reason, Rinpoche felt that these words were like a dying wish. Then the burly man laughed out loud. "I finally don't have to deal with those bastards. I want to pinch them to death every time." Looking at his ecstatic expression, it was as if he had been sentenced to at least 3 years and was suddenly released. Rinpoche looked at him with bright eyes. Needless to say, this was the former Honglu deputy, the one who broke the legs of 4 people and was reported. Rinpoche was curious. Was it so painful to deal with foreigners in the Honglu Bureau? That burly man laughed wildly for a long time before patting Rinpoche's shoulder and saying, "Boss Gu is waiting for you at the back. Turn right from here to the biggest house." Then he threw his head back and laughed out loud. Rinpoche followed the direction he pointed and passed through the first row of buildings. There was a row of slightly shorter buildings at the back, and the door of the largest building on the right was open. "Sir Gu." Rinpoche got the two of them to stay where they were and shouted as he walked to the door. Gu Daxiong was sitting behind a desk. The desk was empty except for 2 big feet. It was different from an ordinary office. There was nothing on the desk. "Come in." Gu Daxiong raised his head and waved at Rinpoche. "Did you see Qi? You should have met him before." Rinpoche felt that they were talking about the burly man from just now. "Yes, he ran away. From now on, you will be in charge until the group of people leave after His Majesty's birthday celebration. All I ask is that they don't bother me and you can do whatever you want. If you don't like him, just beat him up. Just don't kill him." Gu Daxiong casually threw a token on the table. Rinpoche was speechless as he took the token. "Go find Gu Shou and get a set of official robes to alter first. If you see that there's nothing to do in the courtyard, take away the servants and use them. Just one thing, don't let them bother me," Gu Daxiong grinned and reiterated. Rinpoche could only nod. It seemed like he was really throwing everything to him this time. The officials of Dayo were indeed different from the flirtatious and cheap people of other places. "Sir Gu, when exactly is Her Majesty's birthday celebration? How much longer until then?" Ren Baqin cupped his hands and asked. There are still 22 days left. He reckoned that someone would come in the next 2 days. Some of them will stay in the residences of the envoys from other countries, while others will be arranged by them. The rest will be up to you. Where are they arranged? Ren Baqin asked again. There had to be a place for them to be arranged. Find Gu Shou, he will tell you where to go, Gu Daxiong said. If anything happens to them or if there's any trouble, if they deserve to be beaten then beat them up. They were the ones who insisted on coming over. No one begged them to come over. Gu Daxiong interrupted Ren Baqin. When Ren Baqin saw this he felt that it was better to wait and see. Sir Gu, one last question. What if the opponent is an expert? With my skills I can't beat anyone, Ren Baqin finally asked. If he was beaten up by someone else he would definitely be buried by the Empress. Gu Daxiong looked at Ren Baqin suspiciously. Even though Ren Baqin's physique was a little thin and weak, and he didn't look like he could fight, but Her Majesty actually arranged for a weakling to come over? In any case, Ren Baqin was the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, and that old lady was very powerful. Wait. After finishing his sentence, Gu Daxiong stood up and walked towards the door. When he passed by Ren Baqin he swung his arm and almost flipped Ren Baqin over. Why don't you have any strength at all? Gu Daxiong turned his head and looked at Ren Baqin doubtfully. Ren Baqin was pushed back a few steps. Looking at Gu Daxiong's innocent and doubtful face, he could only sigh. Gu Daxiong walked to the door and shouted, Xiong Pai, get your ass over here. This shout was really earth-shattering, and the Honglu Bureau was immediately thrown into chaos. Boss, he's here, he's here. A loud voice came from afar. When the person appeared at the door, Ren Baqin immediately felt as if a wall had suddenly appeared in front of the door. Even half of the light outside the door was blocked, and the room became dark in an instant. The person who appeared at the door was a burly man who was more than 2 meters tall. He was bald, bare-chested and wore a pair of cloth pants. His entire body was bulging with muscles, and there were many scratches on his body that looked like those left by wild beasts. Gu Daxiong's physique was like that of a bear, but the person outside was taller and stronger than him. Xiong Pai were the largest of their kind, and the person at the door really lived up to his name. Compared to him, Caretaker Sure was not much stronger than a chicken. Xiong Pai, this is the newly appointed deputy. You will follow him for the next few days and beat up whoever he tells you to beat up. Oh, greetings, deputy. Su Dali cupped his hands towards Ren Baqin. His voice was a little muffled and he seemed a little silly. Ren Baqin walked to Gu Daxiong's side and compared the difference in their physiques. Gu Daxiong's arms were almost as thick as his waist. Just by standing there he was like King Kong, giving people a huge sense of oppression. Especially when looking at the scars on his body from such a close distance, Ren Baqin felt that his entire body was emitting a fierce aura. If a hatchet man was to be graded based on his appearance, Ren Baqin felt that he could be given a score of 9. He gave off 1 mark because he was afraid that Xiong Pai would become arrogant. As long as his strength is not at the heaven rank, no one can defeat him. Gu Daxiong hammered his chest twice, producing a thumping sound. Xiong Pai revealed a simple and honest smile, and there were still shreds of meat in the gaps between his teeth. Was heaven rank the division of strength in this world? Ren Baqin did not know whether it was heaven rank, man rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, or upwards ho. In any case, heaven rank should be very powerful, and he did not know what rank the Empress was at. Ren Baqin cupped his hands and thanked, Thank you, Sir Gu. It's all right. Looking at your small physique he will follow you for the next few days. Gu Daxiong waved his hands. Then where should I look for Gu Shou? The house at the very end. Gu Daxiong pointed to the left side of the main door. Thank you, then I will take my leave. Ren Baqin walked out of the door and Xiong Pai followed him. Ren Baqin turned his head and looked at Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai was much taller than him, and he had to raise his head to look at Xiong Pai's face. When Xiong Pai walked, Ren Baqin could feel the tremors under his feet. I will have to take care of you for the next few days. Everyone has to complete the tasks given by the higher-ups, Ren Baqin said to Xiong Pai. Deputy, I will beat up whoever you tell me to. Xiong Pai grinned and gave a simple and honest smile. Yes, it sounded crude, but the logic was not crude. That was exactly what he meant. Ren Baqin nodded his head in satisfaction and went to the room at the very end to look for Gu Shou. After entering, he realized that Gu Daxiong was 1 size smaller. Even his actions were exactly the same. He was sitting on a chair and both his legs were directly placed on the table. Chapter 74. Gu Shou threw an official robe to Ren Baqian. If it was worn by someone else it might be just right or slightly loose, but if it was worn by Ren Baqian it would be unsightly. He held it in his hands and prepared to find a tailor shop to change it. Originally, Teng Hulu and Tai Dao were his two bodyguards. Now with Xiong Pai they were nothing. Standing in front of Xiong Pai one would have to look up to him. Although Teng Hulu and Tai Dao were not small, they were only about 1.75 meters tall, similar to Ren Baqian. It was just that their bodies were much more muscular and weighed at least 100 kilograms. But compared to Xiong Pai they were as thin and weak as chicks. Ren Baqian pressed on Xiong Pai's arm. It was as if it was made of steel. "Sir Ren, this is?" the two asked. "This is Xiong Pai. He will be following me for the next few days. Both of you can go back first," Ren Baqian said. "Deal with those animal hides as soon as possible. I still need them." The two nodded their heads. They were originally from the Beast Park. They followed Ren Baqian every day because it was easy for something to happen when Ren Baqian went out alone. With Xiong Pai by his side, the two of them had nothing to worry about. "What do you usually do in the division?" Ren Baqian asked Xiong Pai after the two of them left. "Drink, sleep and practice martial arts." Xiong Pai grinned. "Practice martial arts? What do you practice?" Ren Baqian asked with interest. "Deputy, you will know when you come." Xiong Pai led Ren Baqian around the row of houses. There was a field at the back. At this moment there were 5 or 6 people there. A few of them were practicing martial arts. Their movements were very fast and powerful. There was also someone lifting a stone block. It was the kind that weighed 100 kilograms. He raised it horizontally and put it down again and again. When Ren Baqian arrived he saw that the other party was sweating profusely. He had done more than 30 stone blocks in a row and was still the same. Ren Baqian did not know how many stone blocks he had done. "What do you usually do?" Ren Baqian asked. He was curious about Xiong Pai's strength. After all, there were not many people with such a physique in Dayo. Although physique did not represent strength, Gu Daxiong had specially asked Xiong Pai to follow him. Presumably Xiong Pai's strength was top-notch. "My lord, please watch from the side lest you get hurt." Xiong Pai grinned and walked to the side. There was a big stone that was 1 meter square. He directly hugged it with both hands and shouted loudly. He lifted the huge stone up to his eyebrows and slowly put it down. Then he raised it again and put it down again. Ren Baqian, who was standing at the side, opened his mouth and was almost stunned by him. One had to know that a 1 meter square stone weighed 2 to 3 tons, and he lifted it just like that? Moreover, he raised and lowered it several times. Finally, with a loud shout, he directly threw the stone over his head, throwing it 2 to 3 meters high. "Damn." Ren Baqian couldn't help but speak. If it landed like that, an ordinary person would have been smashed into a meat patty. It would be easier for Ren Baqian to accept if he were to toss 200 to 150 kilograms into the air. But this was 2 to 3 tons, almost the weight of a car. Xiong Pai, on the other hand, caught it calmly and steadily. He only pressed his legs down a little to cushion the impact. Then he threw the stone up again and caught it again. When Xiong Pai threw the stone for fun, the other player couldn't play anymore. He got a stone that weighed 100 or 200 kilograms, but Xiong Pai got a stone that was 20 times the size. How could he play? It was embarrassing. "All right, stop," Ren Baqian hurriedly shouted. Looking at Xiong Pai's training movements made him a little dizzy. His heart was trembling and he always felt that if he missed, a freshly made pizza would appear in front of him. If Xiong Pai were to dye his entire body green he could become the Hulk. Wouldn't it attract suspicion? Upon hearing Ren Baqian's shout, Xiong Pai immediately turned around and walked away. He didn't even catch the stone and smashed it on the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble. "Let's go and change your official uniform first." Ren Baqian looked at Xiong Pai in front of him. Even after throwing a 2 to 3 ton stone a few times, he didn't even break a sweat. After bringing Xiong Pai out, Ren Baqian felt that he didn't have to worry about being hit by people when he walked. With such a guy behind him, no one would be blind enough to bump into him. Xiong Pai's physique was rather terrifying for the people of Dayo. He was the kind that would attract sidelong glances wherever he went. Zhulian district basically had more yamen offices and very few residences and shops. Ren Baqian directly brought Xiong Pai to Gujiazhai district. There were more residences there and it should be easier to find a shop for changing clothes. Just as he entered the main street of Gujiazhai, he saw a shaved ice shop at the side. There were many people sitting inside and they were all there to avoid the summer heat and eat shaved ice. This was still in the morning. If it was in the afternoon there would be more people. Qingshan. Ren Baqin went in and shouted. Sigh, Sir Ren. Sure. Qingshan raised his head and shouted. The dust on the roof beam kept falling. Lower your voice, don't be so loud. Ren Baqin rubbed his ears and said, Give me 2 bowls of shaved ice, any fruit. Then he found an empty table and sat down. Sit here. Ren Baqin patted the stool beside him. Xiong Pai shook his head and said, I'd better not sit. Sit, I said so. Ren Baqin insisted. There was no reason for him to stand while he was sitting. He still needed his protection from now on. Seeing that Ren Baqin insisted, Xiong Pai slowly sat down. Crack. The long stool immediately broke. Xiong Pai got into a horse stance, stood up and scratched his head. I'd better stand. Ren Baqin was speechless. It seemed like Xiong Pai had broken 1 or 2 stools from sitting and was already experienced. Looking at Xiong Pai's physique, Ren Baqin called out to Shi Qingshan, Give me another bowl of shaved ice. When the 3 bowls of shaved ice were served, Ren Baqin picked the color that suited him the best and pushed the other 2 bowls to Xiong Pai. This is for you. Don't eat too quickly. Along the way he felt that Xiong Pai was a little silly and was somewhat similar to Tong Jia. Ren Baqin was only halfway through his meal when he looked up and saw that Xiong Pai had already finished 2 bowls. He was still licking his lips and had a satisfied look on his face. This is cooling. Xiong Pai laughed foolishly. Ren Baqin quickly finished his bowl and looked up to call out to Shi Qingshan, Qingshan, where do you find clothes changing? Walk 300 steps forward and there will be one in the alley next to it. Let's go. Ren Baqin called out and brought Xiong Pai to the location that Shi Qingshan pointed out. Indeed, they saw an alley that turned right. It was only 2 meters wide and there were wooden houses at the side. After walking for a while, they didn't see a single signboard. Brother, can I ask where the clothes-changing shop is? Ren Baqin called out to a burly man who had just come out of the house to pour some water. You have walked past it. That's the one. That man took a glance at Ren Baqin and then looked at Xiong Pai who was behind him. He stretched out his hand and pointed. Ren Baqin turned around and saw that the man was pointing at the 3rd door at the entrance of the alley. Thanks, brother. Ren Baqin laughed, turned around and entered the house with Xiong Pai. Chapter 75. Ren Baqin stayed in the Honglu Bureau for 2 days and more or less understood the people and rules there. During this period he found out that Xiong Pai lived in a courtyard not far from the Honglu Bureau. Those outsiders were usually arranged to stay there. Xiong Pai loitered around the courtyard and could definitely play a role in stabilizing the situation. During this period Ren Baqin made a trip back to Earth. When he came back he took 300 song poems, and sat in the Honglu Bureau. When he had nothing to do he would recite song poems. At least, he had nothing to do and was still in a state of idleness. Xiong Pai followed Ren Baqin wherever he went. When Ren Baqin was reciting song poems, Xiong Pai would immediately sit on the ground and start snoring. Ren Baqin wished he could stuff socks into Xiong Pai's mouth. Deputy, someone's here. On the afternoon of his first day back from Earth, Ren Baqin was pondering how to stuff Xiong Pai's mouth when a loud voice came from outside. Who's that? Ren Baqin couldn't react for a moment. He said he's called Mr. Emptiness. The person who came in was one of the guards at the entrance. His name was Qi Sheng. He came from the same village as the original deputy Qi Ji. There was another guard called Qi Heng who was also at the entrance. Mr. Emptiness? Ren Baqin immediately reacted. These were the people who came to celebrate the Empress's birthday. Xiong Pai, get up and follow me to take a look. Ren Baqin kicked Xiong Pai's waist twice. It felt like he was kicking a rock. He brought the sleepy Xiong Pai to the entrance and saw 4 pretty young ladies in colorful clothes carrying a palanquin. When the 4 ladies saw him, they grabbed a handful of flower petals from their waist pockets and scattered them into the sky. Who's coming? Ren Baqin stood at the entrance and looked at this scene. He had a bad premonition. Mr. Emptiness has arrived, the young lady in front shouted delicately and scattered another handful of flower petals. Please follow me in to register. Leave the palanquin outside. Ren Baqin looked at her awkwardly. What was she trying to do? Cough, cough. A series of coughing sounds came from within the palanquin. Soon after, the curtain was lifted, and a young man wearing a silver silk robe walked out. His face was covered with a layer of powder and his lips were green. His appearance was passable, but this sickly posture that seemed like it would be blown away by a gust of wind was no longer just a sign of emptiness, It was clearly a sign of kidney deficiency. Young master kidney deficiency, right? Follow me. With his hands behind his back, Rinpoche turned around and walked in expressionlessly. Cough cough. It's young master emptiness, young master emptiness. Young master emptiness quickly explained. I'm just joking, Mr. Emptiness. Rinpoche didn't even turn his head. Cough cough cough. Mr. Emptiness coughed again. A strange look flashed across his eyes. However, when he saw that Xiong Pai was staring at him expressionlessly, the strange look in his eyes gradually disappeared. He coughed and followed behind Xiong Pai. Do you have a travel pass? Rinpoche asked. I lost it. Foreigners who came to Dayo would definitely need a travel permit from the border. Needless to say, there was no such thing. Thinking about it, it made sense. The people who came to the Empress's birthday celebration had all kinds of backgrounds. There was no guarantee that some of them would simply ignore the law. This kind of thing happened quite often in previous years. Rinpoche had also heard about it 2 days ago. Rinpoche brought Mr. Emptiness back to the deputy's room. He immediately took out a pen and paper from the shelf at the side and placed them on the table. Name, birthplace, origin, position, whether accommodation has been arranged, and the purpose of your visit. Please write down all these. If you are here to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday, it will be sent to Her Majesty. Rinpoche sat behind the table after he finished speaking. Cough cough, how should I address you? Mr. Emptiness covered his mouth and asked. Honglu Deputy, my surname is Ren, Rinpoche said indifferently. Mr. Emptiness stood in front of the table and wrote something on the paper. Following which, with a flick of his wrist, the paper turned into a white shadow and flew towards Rinpoche's chest. Bang! Before the paper could fly past the table, it was pressed down by a big hand. In the next moment, the entire table was smashed into pieces by his palm. Xiong Pai crushed the table with one hand and stared fixedly at Mr. Emptiness. He gave off the feeling that he was a wild beast that was ready to pounce. Mr. Emptiness had no doubt that as long as Rinpoche opened his mouth, this beast-like burly man would immediately pounce on him. The feeling that this burly man gave him was that he was extremely dangerous. Rinpoche's expression did not change, but his palms were a little sweaty. A surge of anger was rising in his chest. The people in this world would really start a fight whenever there was a disagreement. He originally thought that only the aboriginals were like this. It seemed that the people from other countries were not any better. Of course, this Mr. Emptiness was definitely not an ordinary person. Attacking a deputy. Do you think I should kill you or bury you? Rinpoche looked straight at him and sneered. Sorry, I just threw it casually. If he did not make a move, it would have slowed down when it reached the deputy. Even an ordinary person could easily catch it. I did not expect this to cause such a misunderstanding. Cough cough. Mr. Emptiness revealed an apologetic smile. If anything happens again, you will be buried under Lan City, Rinpoche continued coldly. You damaged a table, a piece of Honglu Bureau's special paper, and a compensation of 100 taels of silver. Mr. Emptiness took out a few golden leaves from his waist and lightly threw them to Xiong Pai. Or rather, they should be called golden leaves. They were like books with 10 pages and could be taken apart for use. I don't have a place to stay. I'm afraid I will have to trouble you to arrange it for me, Mr. Emptiness said. Rinpoche rummaged through the ground. That piece of paper was only left with fragments. Before that, I have to fill it in again. Rinpoche stood up and found another piece of paper from the cabinet beside him. This time, Mr. Emptiness could only place the paper on the wall and write. He coughed a few times while writing. Rinpoche felt that there seemed to be some problems with his lungs. He did not know if it was because of his training or because of this. I have finished writing. Mr. Emptiness passed the paper to Rinpoche. Rinpoche glanced at it. This Mr. Emptiness's surname was Zhao. He could recognize 2 words from his name, but there was one that he did not recognize. He was from Great Xia's XX Zhao family. He also did not recognize the name of the place. He placed the paper on a shelf and pressed a piece of wood on it. I will bring you to the place where you will stay. Rinpoche walked in front with Xiong Pai. Mr. Emptiness left the Honglu Bureau and got on a sedan chair and followed behind. After walking for a short distance, they arrived at a courtyard. They were all individual courtyards and each courtyard had 4 rooms. One of them was the kitchen, one was the master bedroom, and the other 2 were for the attendants. The courtyard was divided into 3 rows. The first row faced the main street, and Rinpoche arranged for Mr. Emptiness to stay there. He was the first to arrive, so naturally the place was the best. Mr. Emptiness was satisfied with this position. After getting off the sedan chair, he cupped his hands and thanked Rinpoche. In a while, someone will send you a sign to prove that you are staying in this courtyard, Rinpoche said to him. You can make your own arrangements. There are bedding and whatnot inside. Cough cough, thank you very much, Deputy Rin. Mr. Emptiness coughed violently after finishing his sentence. The handkerchief covering his mouth was dyed red. I shall not disturb you any more. Rinpoche saw that he was coughing up blood and hurriedly left. Could it be that he was suffering from tuberculosis? It was better to stay away from him. After leaving the courtyard, Rinpoche turned back to take a look. It was the Empress's birthday celebration. Why did a sickly person like him come all the way here? But these people were really ruthless. If he did not have Xiong Pai by his side to protect him, he would have been in trouble. What did he mean by slowing down when he was in front of him? Who was he trying to fool? To be able to throw a piece of soft paper like a dart, what kind of technique did he have? This was only the first person and he did not know what kind of people would come after him. He was afraid that this task would be more troublesome than what he had originally thought. If there were many of these people, it would be difficult to deal with them without using force to suppress them. Chapter 76. Rinpoche strolled back with Xiong Pai. He deeply felt that this job might not be as easy as he had previously thought. Just the fact that Mr. Emptiness's palanquin was carried by the 4 young ladies who were able to carry the palanquin all the way to Lan City showed that they were definitely not ordinary people. He fiddled with the golden page in his hand. It really looked like a pocket-sized golden book. Taking a closer look, he realized that there were words carved on each page. It was a pity that he couldn't understand what was written. Just as he returned to the entrance of the Honglu Bureau, he saw a young man wearing a dirty robe and carrying a book on his back. He was talking to Qi Heng and Qi Sheng. It was the kind that Ning Kaichen carried in a Chinese ghost story. It was used to store the 4 books and 5 classics. There was a piece protruding from the top to block the sun during the day and also to block the rain during the rain. No one knew what they were talking about, but Qi Sheng suddenly took a step forward, scaring the young man so much that he almost fell to the ground. What's going on? Rinpoche asked as he approached. Deputy? Both of them turned around and greeted him with cupped hands. This is. He said he came to celebrate His Majesty's birthday, Qi Heng said. Rinpoche sized him up. That young man was about 16 or 17 years old and had a tender face. Rinpoche didn't know what kind of family would actually allow him to cross the border and come to Dayo. His body was a little dirty. He didn't know how long it had been since he last bathed. His robe was covered in dust. Are you the deputy here? The young man asked curiously. Rinpoche nodded. I am. What, you don't look like one. The young man nodded honestly. It doesn't look like it. You will be beaten for being so honest. Rinpoche looked at him from the corner of his eyes. I'm sorry. I meant that you don't look like someone from Dayo, the young man quickly said. You came by yourself? Yes, the young man said. Come in with me and register yourself. Rinpoche waved his hand and walked into the courtyard with his hands behind his back. How should I address you? Rinpoche asked casually. Surname Ning, given name Kaichen. Ning Kaichen? Rinpoche suddenly turned his head to look at Ning Kaichen. His neck almost turned 180 degrees, scaring Ning Kaichen who was behind him. Sir, it's Ning Kaichen, what's wrong? Is Xiaoqian doing well? Rinpoche put on a fake smile and didn't know what to think. I've just met young Master Kidney Deficiency and now there's Ning Kaichen. This world is really a coincidence and it's a small one. Who is little Qian? Ning Kaichen was at a loss. Perhaps you will meet them in the future, Rinpoche said. When he returned to the room it was still a mess. The broken table lay on the floor, and there were many broken pieces scattered around. Fill in this form. Name, place of origin, background, position, whether accommodation has been arranged, and the purpose of your visit. Rinpoche passed the paper to him and pointed to the windowsill. It didn't take long for Rinpoche to receive the paper from Ning Kaichen. He scanned through the paper and saw that it was from Great Xia. After putting the paper away, she brought him to his residence. Along the way, Rinpoche inquired about the happenings along the way. He was very curious about everything in the outside world. At the mention of this, Ning Kaichen couldn't stop talking. He was in high spirits as he recounted his experiences. Along the way, he described it as though Tang Seng went on a pilgrimage for 81 hardships. Sir, there's something you don't know. One day I was camping in the deep mountains. A huge bird covered the sky and covered the sun. When it flapped its wings, it almost blew me off the mountain. Later on, I hugged an old tree that was hundreds of years old and saved my life. At that time, my heart almost jumped out of my chest. I didn't expect such an exaggerated thing to exist in this world. It was really an eye-opener. When I return, I will definitely draw this thing and let the world know about it. Another time, I was camping in an ancient temple. In the middle of the night, a young lady suddenly came to seek shelter. She said that she missed the right time to travel in the mountains. I shared half of my rations with her. Later on, she said that she wanted me to rest at her house for a day to thank her. At that time, I thought that I was indeed a little tired from traveling for a few days. Since her house wasn't far away, I thought of going to her house to rest for a day. Later on, when I woke up, there wasn't any luxurious house. Instead, there was an ancient tomb around it. Another time, I met a group of robbers. When they saw that I had nothing on me, they kidnapped me and brought me to the mountain. The king of the mountain was actually a woman. She was 16 years old, unmarried, and as beautiful as a flower. When they saw that I was a scholar and that I was fair, they wanted to marry me. Later on, I pretended to agree and ran away while they were preparing for the wedding banquet. Now that I think about it, it's really sad. Ren Baqin was dumbfounded by Ning Caichen's bluff. He had to admit that Ning Caichen was more suitable for storytelling than him. Even though Ning Caichen looked immature and weak, he was a veteran in bragging. Ren Baqin felt that if he didn't have such outstanding bragging skills, he might not have been able to arrive at Lan City unscathed. It was a short journey from the Honglu Bureau to his residence. At the very least, Ren Baqin felt that he couldn't bear not to take care of him after listening to his words and the hardships he went through along the way. He didn't even want the beautiful female king of the 28 mountain village just to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday. This kind intention was really touching. Ren Baqin brought him to his residence. It was a courtyard that was connected to Mr. Emptiness's. "You can stay here for the time being," Ren Baqin said. "Thank you very much, deputy." "I can't thank you enough," Ning Caichen said. He felt a little regretful that he couldn't continue to brag. "I'm just doing my job. If there's anything, you can look for me at the Honglu Bureau. If I'm not around, look for someone else," Ren Baqin instructed. After all, he didn't look like he was very good at fighting. Of course, this was hard to say. After all, he had traveled a long way to get here. Bragging skills alone might not always be useful. This Ning Caichen might be an expert in disguising himself as a pig to eat a tiger. Ren Baqin waved his hand at Ning Caichen and brought Xiong Pai back. When he passed by the courtyard where Mr. Emptiness lived, he took a glance inside. The sedan chair was still there, but he didn't see the 4 women who were carrying it. They should be in the house. After returning to the Honglu Bureau, he didn't encounter anything else. He sat there and recited the song CI until the sky turned dark. When he estimated that it was about time, he sent Xiong Pai back and strolled to the Qin medicine shop alone. Now that he was wearing his official uniform, he wouldn't encounter any trouble walking on the streets. Previously, he mentioned that as long as he wore this uniform, it would represent that he was an official of Dayo. Even if he didn't look like an aboriginal, the aboriginals would still treat him as one. Being able to stroll around by himself without 2 burly bodyguards made Ren Baqin feel rather comfortable. There weren't many people in the Qin medicine shop. When Qin Zixing saw Ren Baqin, he was a little surprised and asked, "Mr. Ren, are you an official in Dayo?" "Just a nominal position in the Honglu Bureau." Ren Baqin smiled. "You are wearing a secondary class, rank 6 official uniform. It shouldn't be as simple as a nominal position." Qin Zixing laughed. Ren Baqin knew that the Honglu Bureau's deputy was a primary class, rank 6 official. However, seeing that Qin Zixing could tell at a glance, Ren Baqin asked him about the differences between official uniforms. Every rank of official had a different uniform. "I've learned a lot." Ren Baqin cupped his hands in obeisance. He only knew a little about these things that everyone in Dayo, especially in Lan City, knew about. Chapter 77. After reading various treatises on typhoid and diseases, to Qin Zixing for an hour, Ren Baqin left the Qin family's shop, strolled around the streets and found a 2-story restaurant. He wanted to see how the food here tasted. After being here for so many days, he had always eaten in the Beast Park and had not had the opportunity to eat outside. Ren Baqin saw that there were quite a lot of people inside. When he entered, it was quiet inside. There were a few bald burly men at each table and all of them looked over. There were also a few heroic-looking women. They were all ordinary aboriginals. If an ordinary person encountered such a scene, his legs would probably go soft. Imagine if you entered a restaurant and all the people inside were 200 to 300 kilograms of burly men. Moreover, all of them were bald and looked at you fiercely. Most people would just turn around and leave. Rinpoche had seen a lot of such scenes in Dayo these days. He was somewhat used to it and did not mind. When the others saw the official robe that he was wearing, they all turned around and acted as if nothing had happened. They ate the meat in big mouthfuls, chatted loudly, and were extraordinarily lively. Rinpoche found a table in the corner and sat down. The lights in front of him dimmed and a burly man appeared in front of him. "Sir, what do you want to eat?" Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at the other party. The tone and expression of the other party did not seem to be asking him what he wanted to eat, but more like asking him how he wanted to die. Rinpoche sighed. With regards to these people, he felt helpless. Would it kill him to smile? "What's your specialty?" "Sir, we're good at everything here. As long as one has eaten it, no one would say that it's not delicious," the burly man immediately replied. Rinpoche sighed again. In his ears, the meaning of the burly man's words was, "No one would dare to say that it's not delicious." "Give me 2 of your specialty dishes and a pot of wine," Rinpoche said. "All right." The expression and tone of the burly man finally became more lively. He shouted to the back, 2 specialty dishes and a pot of wine. While Rinpoche waited for the dishes, he listened to the conversations around him. He did not need to listen to them. The loud voices of the Dayo people made it impossible for him to not listen to them. They talked about how grains and noodles were expensive nowadays, which stronghold had a fight with another stronghold, which stronghold had injured a few people during hunting, and which family's wife had severely injured a man. They were no different from ordinary citizens in China. At most, they were a little more boorish, bad-tempered, fierce-looking, stronger, more powerful, and would pick a fight with others whenever they had nothing to do. Rinpoche felt that there was still quite a big difference between them, but in essence they were pretty much the same. Of course, there were also those who scolded the merchants of various countries, saying that salt and cloth were expensive, and that they didn't even pay much for furs. Rinpoche suddenly felt that the world had become a lot more lively after listening to these family gossip. Life was supposed to be like this. Full of family trifles, haggling over every ounce. It was not like the palace that he entered and exited every day, which was quiet, cold, and solemn. Not long after, the dishes were served. It was a plate of steamed mutton and a plate of sauce. It was unknown what was used to make the sauce, but it was a little spicy. However, it covered up a lot of the mutton's odor. Tasted pretty good. The other plate was a stewed fish. It was very simple, with only salt and something similar to ginger. However, the fish was tender and tasty. The wine was relatively inferior. It tasted bland and was very turbid. Rinpoche sat there and listened to the bustle around him. He unhurriedly ate half of the dishes and drank all the wine. He actually felt a little tipsy. "Shopkeeper, bill please," Rinpoche shouted. "Sir, 80 copper coins." That burly man appeared in front of Rinpoche again. Rinpoche took out a piece of silver and threw it on the table. "Keep the change." "Thank you, sir." The burly man grinned. His facial expression became even more ferocious, but Rinpoche felt that he was more pleasing to the eye. He got up and left the restaurant. Rinpoche strolled toward the direction of the palace as if he was taking a stroll. Before he reached the palace, he heard a loud noise in front of him, followed by loud laughter. What happened again? Rinpoche was curious and quickened his pace. When he was about to reach the plaza, he finally saw the scene in front of him clearly. The surroundings were dark, but the plaza in front of the palace was brightly lit. He saw more than 20 soldiers standing in a circle with torches in their hands. In the middle were 2 men and a woman. Opposite the 3 of them was a burly man holding a long saber. He wore leather armor on his chest and left shoulder. The laughter came from the burly man holding the long saber. As for the 2 men and the woman opposite him, the 2 men were using long swords while the woman was using a pair of short sabers. The 3 of them obviously couldn't care less about the surrounding soldiers. All their attention was focused on the burly man in front of them. "Hand over Long Wanli's corpse. You have already killed him. Why won't you let us take his corpse away? We just want to bring his corpse back." The woman shouted angrily. Come. Let me test your skills. If you can withstand 10 moves from me, I will let you leave. If you can kill me, I will let you take my corpse away. I guarantee that no one will seek revenge on you. If you can't withstand 10 moves from me, you will also be buried here." The burly man held the saber and laughed wildly. Do you mean what you say? Who are you? One of the men looked around at the surrounding soldiers and shouted. I'm the left guard commander of the palace, Shan Wanshui. Remember this name well? The burly man shouted. As for the three of you, report your names to me after you survive. The three of them looked at each other. It was already difficult enough to deal with more than 20 soldiers around them, not to mention the middle guard commander in front of them. There was only one path in front of the three of them: kill this middle guard commander or withstand 10 moves from him. Otherwise they would definitely die tonight. Rinpoche saw everything clearly from afar and sighed in his heart. Why did they have to come all the way here to deliver their heads? Wasn't it good to be alive? Why did they have to die? Let's see if you, the middle guard commander, are really that powerful. One of the men shouted and pounced toward Shan Wanshui. There was a flash of light in the air like a flower blooming. Showy but impractical. Shan Wanshui laughed and didn't make any other moves. He held the end of his saber and swung it over. There was only a brilliant saber gleam in the air. Sword shadows and flowers were all cut down. That man was shocked and quickly placed his sword in front of his chest. Clang. The sword broke with a sound. Zi Tao. The other man and woman shouted angrily and pounced toward Shan Wanshui. There was a rain of blood in the air. That man was split into two halves. As the two halves of the corpse fell to the ground, blood and internal organs spilled all over. Rinpoche felt disgusted looking at it from afar. It was really too disgusting. However, the people who came this time were really too weak. With this standard, they still dared to snatch Long Wanli's corpse in front of Dayo's palace. This confirmed Rinpoche's opinion that they really came all the way here to deliver their heads. Fortunately, there were 3 of them. If there were 2 more, Shan Wanshui could have killed 5 people tonight. As for Shan Wanshui, he swept his saber horizontally at the 2 people who pounced on him. His movements were incomparably swift. The saber gleam reflected the flames like lightning and disappeared in a flash. The 2 people knew that they couldn't withstand it and dodged. Third move. Shan Wanshui shouted. He held his saber and chopped at the man who was closest to him, smashing a stone slab on the ground into pieces. Fourth move. The hilt of the saber moved toward the woman who was thrusting her twin short sabers. The moment the twin sabers came in contact with the lady, she felt a jolt in her arms. There was a sharp pain in the area between her thumb and forefinger, and the twin sabers were bounced off. Chapter 78. Hong Xian. The remaining man howled in grief. I'll fight you to the death, he roared. His entire body transformed into a shooting star as he charged toward Shan Wanshui with his sword. His posture was similar to Long Wanli's, but his aura was far inferior. A ray of light flashed past. The burly man stood up with his sword in hand, only 6 moves. He then burst out laughing. The burly man's attacks weren't as flashy as the others. Every move was powerful and fast as lightning, but the others couldn't even parry. The commander is mighty. Cheers could be heard from the sidelines. The deaths of the 3 men did not cause any ripples in the hearts of the others. They were already used to it. Rinpoche looked on helplessly as the 3 men died without a complete corpse in the blink of an eye. One man was split in half from the middle, one at the waist, and the last man was split diagonally from shoulder to waist. Fresh blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. Such a cruel scene sent chills down Rinpoche's spine. At the same time, his stomach was in turmoil. The last time Long Wanli challenged the Empress, he was beaten into the ground with just 1 move. By the time he was able to move after being poked by Caretaker Shir's electric baton, the square had already started to fill in the holes. In addition, both sides used a sword and a palm to determine the victor. Rinpoche couldn't see the duel clearly and only saw Long Wanli's back view. Even though he felt it was a pity that Long Wanli was dead, Rinpoche was more excited to see a duel between 2 experts. At this moment, what Rinpoche saw was a bloody massacre. The shock he received and the feeling of barbarism and bloodshed were far greater than the previous time. It could even be said that it was something he had never felt before in his life. He always felt that death was far away from him. Even though he almost lost his head when he first arrived in this world, he managed to survive in the end. This made him, who rarely saw death, feel a sense of alienation from it. However, it was different this time. The brutal massacre was happening in front of him. It made him realize that this world was far crueler than what he had always seen. Just as Rinpoche stood there with his mind blank, the soldiers at the side of the field had already started to clean up. They dug a hole under the broken stone slab and threw the severed limbs into it. Then they started to fill the hole with soil. Not long after, the entire hole was filled up. All that was left was for the stonemason to install another stone slab. It wasn't until those soldiers left that the onlookers dispersed, leaving only Rinpoche standing there with ice-cold hands and feet. After a long time, Rinpoche dragged his heavy footsteps back to the beast park. Gun Gun and Tian Tian had already fallen asleep on the stone slab. Rinpoche's head was in a mess as images kept flashing through his mind. Suddenly, the horrifying scene of him being decapitated like the other three flashed across his mind. That scene made him feel suffocated, and he abruptly sat up on the bed. That one move made him break out in a cold sweat. No matter what, I can't become like that, like those three people, Rinpoche muttered to himself. This isn't Earth, it's a different world. It's not as safe as Earth, and human lives aren't that precious. In the future, I can't just laze around like this. I have to work harder and take the initiative to climb up. Only when my position is so high that others can't move will I be safe. The higher my position, the stronger my importance, the safer I will be, and the further away I will be from the threat of death. I have the backing of a civilized world that is far superior to this place. How can I continue to be muddle-headed and put my life in the hands of others? If it's possible, I want to become stronger too. Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Rinpoche's mind. Finally, they merged into one. He wanted to become stronger, have a higher position, and make himself safer. Only then would he be able to survive in this world. Even though he had such thoughts in the past, they were never as clear, firm, and real as they were now. As a youth who often had fantasies and an ordinary person, the sudden revelation of another side of this world shattered the muddle-headedness that he had been muddle-headed all this while. He felt that the things that he had been working hard and doing in the past were really too little. It was far from enough. Especially after he had gotten rid of the crisis of survival and gained a foothold, he actually began to relax. He had underestimated this world. After tossing and turning for a long time, he finally fell into a deep sleep. Early the next morning he was woken up by a knock on his door. He didn't sleep well that night. Even after he fell asleep, everything that happened at the scene would surface in his mind from time to time, forming a dream. When he woke up, he realized that he was drenched in sweat. He picked up a bowl of water and gulped it down. Rinpoche got up and pushed open the door. He saw Caretaker Shur outside. "Why is your face so pale?" Caretaker Shur looked at Rinpoche and asked curiously. "Maybe I caught a cold last night. Your small physique is too weak." Caretaker Shur laughed boorishly. "The Imperial Kitchen asked you to visit them when you are free." Rinpoche nodded. "I got it. I will go after I finish my work at the Honglu Bureau today. Brother Rin, you can arrange for me to come over." Caretaker Shur waved his hand and left. Rinpoche looked at Caretaker Shur's back as he left. Caretaker Shur still treated him the same as before, but he felt that something was different. It was because his state of mind was different. The Aboriginals had a warm side, a straightforward and adorable side, but also a cruel side. This was what he felt just now. After washing up, he picked up his official robe. This was what he relied on to survive. After putting on his robe, he left the beast park. When he passed by the plaza, he could still smell the lingering smell of blood in the air. However, he didn't show any signs of abnormality. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, he picked up the book, 300 Song Poems, and continued to memorize it. After a while, he felt tired and went to the backyard to watch some people from the Honglu Bureau practice martial arts. Xiong Pai was still playing with that rock that weighed 2 to 3 tons. No one came to the Honglu Bureau for the whole day. Mr. Emptiness and Ning Kaichen, who arrived earlier, didn't have anything to do. Rinpoche was happy to stay in his room. In the afternoon, he reckoned that it was almost time. He bade farewell and went straight to the Imperial Kitchen. When Rinpoche arrived, the Imperial Kitchen had just delivered dinner to the Empress. Everyone was sitting there resting. When they saw Rinpoche, they greeted him one after another. "Brother Ren." "The greetings of Brother Ren." Rinpoche smiled and asked, "Where's Caretaker go?" "He went to deliver dinner to Her Majesty." Looking at the time, "He should be back soon," someone immediately replied. Rinpoche nodded his head. "Are you looking for me because of Her Majesty's birthday banquet?" "Brother Ren, it's like this. Caretaker Go hopes that you can participate in making some dishes. After all, we have just familiarized ourselves with your spices. Now that Her Majesty's birthday banquet is just around the corner, we don't have time to slowly experiment." Rinpoche nodded his head, found a place to sit down, and waited for Caretaker Go to return. Not long after, caretaker Go came back and saw Ren Baqin. His face twitched for a long time and he called out, "Brother Ren. Forget it, call me storyteller Ren in the future. This is my current position in the palace." Ren Baqin waved his hand and said, "Seeing that you are in a difficult position, I won't make things difficult for you." Chapter 79. Ren Baqin tilted his head and looked at him. "Then why did you look like you were eating tea just now?" "Up to you." Ren Baqin shrugged. "Brother Ren, the dishes for Her Majesty's birthday banquet." Caretaker Go called out again. This time he was much more straightforward. It seemed like the hurdle in his heart had been overcome. "Make two, one normal and one unorthodox. Let's see if those people are to Her Majesty's liking. If Her Majesty is happy, we won't torture them. If Her Majesty is unhappy, they can forget about having a good meal," Ren Baqin said. Upon hearing Ren Baqin's words, everyone in the imperial kitchen laughed. "How are the arrangements for the banquet? How many people to a table? How many dishes?" Ren Baqin asked again. "A table for 2, 6 dishes and a bowl of soup for each person. Her Majesty said that this year's banquet will be different from previous years," Caretaker Go said. Ren Baqin nodded his head. This wasn't much. It was simply too easy to come up with 6 main dishes from the Chinese menu. Any birthday banquet or wedding banquet would have at least a dozen dishes. Meatballs, 4 happiness meatballs, twice cooked pork and so on. He was sure that the tongues of those who came would be swallowed. Ren Baqin stayed in the imperial kitchen until midnight. He first picked 8 dishes and let the imperial kitchen chefs practice making them. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and make them into the menu. As for the other menu, Ren Baqin was prepared to go back and study the dark cuisine. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and 1 soup. If he chose this, Ren Baqin was confident that he would definitely give those who came this time an unforgettable experience. A rather unforgettable kind. He guaranteed that they would come back to the banquet next year after eating their fill. The following morning, Ren Baqin was listening to Ning Kaichen brag. It seemed that he realized that Ren Baqin was the only one who could listen to him after going 1 round yesterday. Early in the morning, he came over not long after Ren Baqin arrived and told Ren Baqin the legendary stories of his journey. Ren Baqin was very interested in many of the things he talked about. For example, the local conditions and customs of various places. In the morning, a large group of carriages entered Lan City. The convoy first stopped at a location on Jianghu Street. There were 3 shops there and all of them were sealed with seals on their doors. The signboard above said Wanjialu. A man with a mustache and wearing a purple silk robe came down from the carriage. With his hands behind his back, he raised his head and looked at the 3 sealed shops. "Third uncle, is this our family business in Lan City?" A man came down from the other 2 carriages. They were both in their 20s, one handsome and the other handsome. "Not bad. Your third uncle and the others are all in prison." "This time we came for this matter," the man called fifth uncle said. "These barbarians," one of the valiant-looking young men said indignantly, his face filled with anger. "Silence. This isn't our home. Remember, you can eat whatever you want but you can't say whatever you want. If something happens to you here, no one can save you." The middle-aged man frowned. "I know I was wrong." The valiant man quickly lowered his head and said, "You two know what we're going to do this time, right?" The middle-aged man asked. "I know. But fifth uncle, is that Qi Xiao really as beautiful as a flower?" The handsome young man asked. "Not just that. When I came to Dayo in the past, I saw her from afar. She was an exceptional beauty. I brought you two here just in case. Don't think too much about it. There are a lot of talented young men with the same idea in every country. Now the Yun nation's imperial court is in chaos. That man alone holds power and rejects dissidents. The undercurrent is surging, and we have no choice but to find a place to retreat. There are many wealthy families in Great Xia. Even though we have already made arrangements, it won't be easy to gain a foothold. I was the one who strongly advocated for Dayo. Dayo doesn't lack brave generals and warriors, but it lacks capable people who can govern the country. Even though the current Empress of Dayo is a young woman, her breadth of mind is far from that of an ordinary person. If the two of you can display your talents and interest her, you might be able to gain a foothold in Dayo. Unfortunately, even though your third uncle has been managing the business for many years, he is greedy by nature. Not only did he lose himself, but he also lost the business here. The reputation of the Zhang family has also been ruined by him. This time we are here mainly to salvage the situation here. As for the rest, it's fine as long as you know it. There's no need to force it. Got it, fifth uncle. We believe what you said. In our family, fifth uncle's foresight and knowledge are incomparable to others. We are well aware of it. However, there is a little doubt. If we stay here and people find out, I'm afraid we won't be able to explain to our family, the handsome young man said after they looked at each other. You don't have to worry too much about this. I found 2 people early on who are enough to impersonate you in the family. As long as you live in seclusion, you don't have to worry about being discovered. Even if people find out about your situation here, it's just a coincidence that you have the same name and looks. The family can still settle this matter. Let's go to the Honglu Bureau. The middle-aged man waved his hand at them and ended the conversation. After they returned to the car, their hearts weren't calm. They knew what the middle-aged man meant. He wanted them to find an official position here. Even though they didn't like this barren land, they had no other choice for the sake of their family. However, they were curious about Qi Zixiao, whom the middle-aged man called an exceptional beauty. They wanted to see what the Empress of Deyo, who was praised so highly by their fifth uncle, looked like. The carriage arrived at the Honglu Bureau. A moment later, Ren Baqian received the news and went out with Xiong Pai. At a glance, he saw the 3 people standing at the entrance and the carriage a little further away. In the middle was a middle-aged man with an elegant face and a mustache. The 2 youths behind him were extremely good-looking. They are here to use their beauty trap. Ren Baqian thought to himself when he saw the 2 of them. They are trying to snatch my food. I have to suppress them even without Her Majesty's orders. The other party was stunned when they saw him. This Honglu deputy wasn't an aboriginal, nor was he a remnant citizen of the Hao nation. He looked more like someone from Great Xia or the Yun nation. This meant that someone was 1 step ahead of them. This thought emerged in the minds of the few of them. How do I address the few of you? Where are you from? Why are you here? Ren Baqian asked calmly. He was neither indifferent nor enthusiastic. I'm Zhang Junjing. These 2 are from the same family, Zhang Heqi and Zhang Heju. They know that Her Majesty's birthday is in a few days, so they specially brought gifts from the Yun nation. May I know how to address you, sir? My surname is Ren Baqian. You can also call me Deputy Ren. Ren Baqian smiled politely. Sir Ren, that's a good name. The Kuan Peng spreads its wings for 8,000 miles and will definitely soar to the top. Zhang Heju, the handsome youth, praised. Chapter 80. How long has Sir Ren been in the Honglu Bureau? I've been to Lan City before, but this is the first time I've seen a foreigner serving as an official in Deyo. It's obvious that Her Majesty favors Sir Ren, which is admirable, Zhang Junjing said with a smile as he followed Ren Baqian into the Honglu Bureau with his 2 nephews. I've only been in this position for a short while. Ren Baqian waved his hand. This matter couldn't be kept a secret, and anyone would find out after asking around. Oh. Zhang Junjing's eyes flashed. I'll have to trouble you to fill out this form. Ren Baqian took out 3 pieces of paper and handed it to the 3 nephews. After telling them what he needed, he sat behind the table and quietly observed them. Zhang Junjing was the leader among them, but this time the main characters were probably the other 2 gigolos. Where do you want to stay? Do you have a place to stay? Ren Baqian asked after seeing them finish writing. I'll have to trouble sir to arrange it. Zhang Junjing cupped his hands. Xiong Pai, bring them to the 2 courtyards beside Ning Kaichen, Ren Baqian instructed. All right, deputy. Come with me, Xiong Pai shouted at the few of them. Thank you, sir. Zhang Junjing and the other 2 nephews cupped their hands. Ren Baqian nodded and fell into deep thought after they left. These people looked like they came from big clans. They were different from ordinary people and had a sense of propriety in their words and actions. Even though they had always treated him with courtesy, Ren Baqian didn't have a good impression of them. It was entirely due to the changes in his mentality over the past 2 days that made him feel a sense of crisis. At the same time, he was also thinking about a problem. Now that he was an official in Deyo, what about the people from other nations? Could they? There weren't any in the past, but that didn't mean that there wouldn't be any in the future. In the afternoon, 2 groups of people arrived one after another. One group was from Great Xia and had the surname Lian. The other group was also from the Yun nation and had the surname Hong. Like the Zhang family, these 2 groups of people came in a long line with carriages and horses. They also brought a lot of goods or gifts. Ren Baqian asked Xiong Pai to bring them over. When Xiong Pai returned, he muttered, "Sir, those bastards don't know what's good for them. They actually complain that the conditions are too simple and crude. They're all like this. In my opinion, it's already not bad, but they're still complaining about this and that." Rinpoche squinted his eyes slightly. He knew that Xiongpai was talking about the people from the Lien family who had just been sent over. From the young master of the Lien family to the servants, all of them had an arrogant look on their faces, especially that young master of the Lien family. His eyeballs were almost on top of his head. "Next time, let them find their own accommodation," Rinpoche said casually. That night, Rinpoche handed over the task to someone else and returned to Earth. For the past 3 days, he had been studying and thinking in his room. His mind was completely focused on that world. There were too many aspects to consider. In the past, he was like a spinning top that would only spin once the rope was pulled. Other than saving his own life, his other thoughts were only to create something that existed on Earth or how to earn money. He had never systematically considered what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. However, during these 3 days on Earth, he had figured out his future path. What he was good at was nothing more than relying on the Earth and being famous in the world. As for other aspects, needless to say, he reckoned that no one in Dayo above the age of 10 was weaker than him. As for intellect, he was just an ordinary person with no foresight or wisdom. All he had was the technology, culture, and various theoretical knowledge that had been developed on Earth. This was the only thing that he could show that would make people value him. Even though the individual strength in this world was very strong, they were far from being strong enough to ignore technology. Technology was also very important to them, and culture and various theories were equally important to Dayo. In the past, he was thinking of doing something to earn some money and please the Empress. But now it seemed that those were just small things. If he wanted people to value him, he had to systematically improve the various aspects of Dayo's technology and academic knowledge. Only in this way could his position not be shaken by anything and not be affected by anything. Of course, cozying up to the Empress was indispensable. In this world he knew nothing, and had no foundation at all. In this short period of time, only by cozying up to the Empress would he be safe and sound and be able to do things that could show his value. Rinpoche thought about it a lot. Even though there were still some flaws and it wasn't very comprehensive, he already had a clear goal. The rest could only be slowly perfected in the future. When he returned to that world again, his eyes were clear and he completely knew what to do and how to do it. Brother Rin, you seem a little different today," Caretaker Sure said curiously when he saw Rinpoche in the morning. "I have figured out some things that I have never understood," Rinpoche said with a smile. "If you can't figure it out, just throw it aside. When the time comes, you will know what to do," Caretaker Sure said indifferently, causing Rinpoche to smile. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, Qi Heng and Qi Sheng were still standing at the entrance. When they saw him, they greeted him one after another. "Did anyone come yesterday?" Rinpoche asked casually. There was a group of carriages and a group of 3 people riding on horses. "I saw Xiongpai bringing them away." "It should have been arranged," Qi Heng replied. Rinpoche nodded his head to indicate that he understood. When he entered the deputy's room, a burly man was sitting behind the table with a sluggish look on his face. If he drooled, he would be a living retard. Rinpoche patted the table. "Official Registrar Shi." That burly man quivered. When he saw that it was Rinpoche, he hurriedly stood up and said, "Deputy Rin, you are back. Have you settled the matter?" "Yes," Rinpoche said faintly. "Did anything happen yesterday?" This person was the official registrar of the Honglu Bureau. Rinpoche asked him to make the arrangements yesterday. The reason was very easy to find. The Empress was arranging other matters. In any case, it was impossible for him to confront the Empress. The Empress also knew that he would disappear once every few days. 2 groups of people came yesterday. "I have arranged for them to go over," that burly man said. "If there is nothing else, I will take my leave." "Thank you very much." Rinpoche revealed a smile. The burly man grinned at Rinpoche. Without saying anything else, he immediately left the house. Rinpoche walked 1 round in the house and then came to the backyard. Sure enough, Xiongpai was playing with that huge rock there. When he saw Rinpoche, he hurriedly threw the huge rock like a rubber ball and ran over. "You continue with your training. I will take a look here," Rinpoche said as he felt the huge rock landing on the ground. In the afternoon, when Rinpoche and Xiongpai were staying in the room, a low-ranking official who was usually in charge of the affairs at the Honglu Bureau's courier station ran over to report, "Sir, there is a fight over there." However, there wasn't much panic on his face. It seemed that he was just here to inform Rinpoche about this matter. In any case, they were all from abroad. As long as they didn't damage the courier station, the people from the Honglu Bureau wouldn't care at all. Rinpoche leaned back and asked, "Did they kill anyone?" "Sir, they weren't when I came." That person laughed. At this moment, Deputy Ren's manner of speaking was very similar to Deputy Qiji in the past. "What happened?" Rinpoche then asked. "I'm not too sure either. In any case, they quarreled for a while before fighting," that person said. "Which courtyard?" "Courtyard number 2 and 8. Rinpoche thought for a while. "It was Mr. Emptiness and the people from the Lien family from Great Xia." Chapter 81. Rinpoche brought Xiong Pai and the burly man named Jianghu out of the Honglu Bureau. His footsteps were not hurried and it was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. However, his mind was thinking about how to resolve this matter. After all, they were here to deliver gifts to the Empress. If they couldn't resolve this matter properly in a private fight, it would make them look incompetent and cause more trouble. The Honglu Bureau wasn't far from the post house. They just had to walk around the corner to get there. From afar, Rinpoche could see a group of people surrounding the place and could even hear their cheers. The group of burly men outside were mostly Dayo people. At this moment they had turned into a crowd of onlookers, cheering and applauding one after another. However, when Rinpoche got closer, he also saw a few familiar figures. For example, Ning Saichen's petite figure was squeezing through the crowd. After spending a long time trying to squeeze through the crowd, Ning Kaichen was suddenly pushed back 5 or 6 steps and fell on his butt. Ning Kaichen cursed his bad luck after he got up. He realized that he couldn't squeeze through the crowd, so he jumped outside the crowd like a spring. When Rinpoche came over, he saw this scene. Suddenly, he inexplicably thought of the time when he watched Long Wanli challenge the Empress. Wasn't it the same as Ning Kaichen? A feeling of empathy arose in his heart. The aboriginals were too much of a bully. Ning Kaichen jumped but he could only see a small part of the fight. This made him extremely anxious. He loved watching such a big show the most. Why was he late for such a big show? At this moment he felt someone pat him on the back. He quickly turned his head and saw Xiong Pai's wall-like figure. Soon after, he saw Rinpoche looking at him with an embarrassed expression on his face. Xiong Pai's body was like a wall. Ning Kaichen didn't feel embarrassed at all. When he saw Rinpoche, he quickly pulled him and said, "Deputy Rin, there is a fight going on inside. I don't know if their brains are smashed. Quickly go in and see what's going on." Rinpoche looked at Ning Kaichen and pondered. "You can't wait for their brains to be smashed, right? You really can't judge a book by its cover." "Xiong Pai." Rinpoche turned his head and called out to Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai immediately understood. He stretched his arms forward, picked up the 2 people in front of Rinpoche, and placed them to the side. The 2 of them felt themselves being lifted into the air. They immediately turned their heads and wanted to curse, but when they saw Xiong Pai's figure, they glared at him instead. With Xiong Pai clearing the way, it was much easier for Rinpoche to get in. Ning Kaichen, who was behind him, hurriedly followed behind. He blindly followed Rinpoche's every step for fear that he would be squeezed out again. By the time there were no more people in front of him, Rinpoche had already entered the innermost circle and was able to see the scene clearly. The one who attacked was not Mr. Emptiness as he had expected. He was coughing up blood at the side. 4 delicate girls were circling around a black-clothed old man, throwing punches and palms at him. Although the black-clothed old man wasn't injured, he was trapped and unable to break out. Those 4 ladies were naturally the ones who carried the sedan. Upon seeing this scene, Rinpoche was finally sure that they weren't hired. This thought had been going around in his mind for a few days. Today he was finally able to confirm it. As for the black-clothed old man, he was an old butler of the Lien family. He had extraordinary skills, and if it weren't for the tacit cooperation of these 4 ladies, it would have been difficult to trap him. However, they were only able to trap him. Mr. Lien Baoqing, who was at the back, was watching the fight with a fierce look on his face. He wasn't happy that he couldn't deal with these ladies even after such a long time. At this moment, someone beside him said something. He looked up and immediately saw Xiong Pai's huge figure. If this barbarian was here, then the deputy would definitely be here as well. A ruthless look flashed across Lien Baoqing's face. Lien Baoqing beat them to death. Everyone in the crowd immediately heard this sentence. A few beautiful ladies actually wanted to beat them to death. How vicious and merciless. When Ren Baqian heard this, he was stunned. He looked to the opposite side and saw that Lien Baoqing had just shifted his gaze to the side as if he didn't see Ren Baqian. However, Ren Baqian clearly saw Lien Baoqing shifting his gaze away from him. With Xiong Pai's huge figure, it was impossible for him not to see it. When Ren Baqian thought about how Lien Baoqing had complained a few days ago, he sneered in his heart. Was he trying to humiliate him? At this moment, the situation of the battle suddenly changed. Following Lien Baoqing's shout, although Lien Cheng's aura didn't change, his moves became much more ferocious. Suddenly, a delicate cry was heard. One of the young ladies flipped backward, and a white light flashed from her abdomen to her neck. Her clothes were cut into two and her breasts were exposed. However, a line of blood spurted out from the abdomen of that young lady. At this moment, everyone realized that there was a soft sword in Lien Baqian's hand. Like a venomous snake, it tried to bite the other three. If this young lady hadn't dodged in time, her abdomen would have been cut open. Even now, she was still severely injured. Originally, the four young ladies could only trap Lien Baqian, who was unarmed. Now that there was one less person and Lien Baqian had a weapon in his hand, the situation immediately changed. The few of them were immediately surrounded by danger. In just a short while, a few more wounds appeared on their bodies. Seeing this situation, Mr. Emptiness coughed even more violently. Originally, he was using a handkerchief to cover his mouth. The handkerchief was stained with traces of blood, but now, he directly spurted out a mouthful of blood. Like a sharp arrow, it wasn't shot toward the old man in the middle of the battlefield, but directly toward Lien Baoqing's face. "Be careful, mister," someone suddenly shouted from the side. A burly man unsheathed his long saber and blocked the blood arrow. When the blood arrow hit the long saber, it immediately lost its strength and fell to the ground. Then a scene that shocked everyone happened. The place where the blood splashed on the long saber seemed to have melted. First it softened. Then half of the long saber fell to the ground with a clang. Lien Baoqing was shocked by this situation. If even a steel saber was like this, he would shudder in fear if the blood were to hit him. A streak of green flashed across his face. His gaze toward Mr. Emptiness was filled with a wild, murderous intent. Ren Baqian was also surprised. How was that blood that was spurted out? It was obviously strong acid, wasn't it? It was impossible for human blood to be corrosive. Could it be that there was also super strong gastric acid? Ren Baqian had always heard the phrase, "I spit on you." Today he had learned something new. If this Mr. Emptiness spat on someone's face, it wouldn't be as simple as disfigurement. Kill them, including that sickly guy. Go kill them. I want to hack them into pieces. Lien Baoqing had a crazy look on his face. Hearing his shout, Ren Baqian knew that this show couldn't continue. If he continued to watch, his brain would really be smashed to pieces. With a gloomy face, Ren Baqian turned his head and said to Xiong Pai, "Stop them. If anyone dares to make a move after I shout for them to stop, kill them without mercy." This was Dayo's imperial capital. If they continued to stir up trouble, he would be done for. Chapter 82. After Ren Baqian shouted, none of the people in the field stopped, or rather they didn't dare to stop. If they stopped and the other party didn't, they would immediately fall into a disadvantageous position. Furthermore, they simply didn't have the time to see who shouted. Xiong Pai, separate them. Those who don't listen, kill them. While Ren Baqian was speaking with a gloomy face, Lien Baoqing was still hooting, "Kill them, I want to skin them to use as cushions for my chair. As for that sickly guy, I want to chop him into pieces." However, he was destined to fail. Xiong Pai rushed into the group of people in a few steps. With a swing of his arm, he hit a young girl in front of him. Like a kite with a broken string, she flew out of the crowd while vomiting blood. Have tender feelings for the fairer sex? Xiong Pai didn't have such a thought. In any case, he would do whatever the deputy instructed him to do. The old man in black, Lien Baoqing, saw that there was no time to lose. The flexible sword in his hand turned into a myriad of stars and went straight for the other two young girls. The two young girls shouted angrily. As they dodged the cold rays, they turned their heads to look at Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai directly and efficiently kicked at the old man in black. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the old man leaped into the air to avoid this kick. His flexible sword turned into a poisonous snake and went straight for Xiong Pai. Regardless of whether it was for self-protection or for other reasons, he actually attacked Xiong Pai. This action made Rinpoche laugh incessantly. Xiong Pai let out a deep roar from his throat. This man, who had always given Rinpoche the impression of a simple and honest man, finally revealed his fangs. He simply ignored those specks of cold light, raised his hands high and directly hammered down. Although Lien Baqin used his arms to block in time, how could he withstand Xiong Pai's brute force? Bang! Everyone in the field felt the ground under their feet shake. Lien Baqin was smashed into the ground by Xiong Pai. Liangyu Lianqi, stop, come back. Cough cough. Mr. Emptiness shouted. Because their sisters were sent flying, they were hesitating whether to attack Xiong Pai or the seriously injured Lien Baqin. Mr. Even though the two young girls knew that they were no match for Xiong Pai, they still glared at him fiercely before obeying his order to retreat. Rinpoche frowned as he walked into the field. What's going on? No one answered. When the surrounding Dayo people saw a foreigner dressed in a Dayo official's uniform walking into the arena, they curiously inquired about him and found out that he was the newly appointed Honglu deputy. They continued to watch the show. Lien Baoqing looked at Lien Tong, who had half his body in the ground, and then looked at Xiong Pai's huge body. After being shocked by Xiong Pai's huge strength, his lips trembled for a long time. You actually dare? Dare what? Rinpoche looked at Lien Baoqing with a smile on his face. Then he lowered his head to look at Lien Baoqing, who was already limp and unconscious. Rinpoche looked at Lien Baoqing with pity and said, "What a pity. You actually attacked Xiong Pai and got beaten up so badly." Tsk. Rinpoche sighed. It's quite painful to live like this. Trample him to death and help him to be free. Rinpoche's words were completely different from what he had said before, and everyone immediately fell silent. Lien Baoqing, Ning Kaichen, and even the people from the Zhang and Hong clans standing at the side felt a chill down their spines. They suddenly felt that this Honglu deputy who looked easy to bully was actually a vicious wolf who would devour people without spitting out the bones. How dare you? How dare you? I'll kill your entire family. Lien Baoqing jumped up as if his tail had been stepped on and clamored at Rinpoche. Xiong Pai had a few bloody scars on his body, but he acted as if he didn't feel them. Just by looking at the hideous scars on his body, one could guess that this kind of injury had almost no effect on him. Rinpoche grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He lifted his leg and stepped on Lien Baoqing's exposed chest. Gotcha. First Xiong Pai's bones shattered. Then, like a water bag being stepped on, fresh blood spurted out from his 5 orifices. Rinpoche suppressed the disgust in his heart and revealed a calm and unruffled smile. He looked at Lien Baoqing and said, "Attacking an official of the Honglu Bureau in Dayo. You guys are really gutsy. Do you think there's no one capable in Dayo?" Seeing Rinpoche smile, even Lien Baoqing, who had a lawless temperament, felt his heart tremble. Following which, his heart was filled with rage and endless humiliation. That's his normal reaction after being attacked. Lien Baoqing squeezed out these few words from the gaps of his teeth. Ever since he was young, he could do whatever he wanted to do. He had never been humiliated like this before. The rage in his heart was about to ignite his entire body. If it wasn't for Rinpoche's words that woke him up a little, he would have already gone crazy. Xiong Pai's reaction is also normal. He was stomped to death by your order? Lien Baoqing felt as if his heart was on fire. He felt like he was going to explode in the next moment. There must be a punishment for attacking an official, isn't there? Otherwise, if anyone did this for no reason, where would the dignity of Dayo be? Rinpoche smiled and walked in front of Lien Baoqing. The surrounding Dayo people all laughed. They felt that this Honglu Bureau deputy who looked like a foreigner was a good person and they liked him very much. This time, I'm here to participate in the birthday celebration of the Dayo Emperor. I've brought a gift with me. I'll definitely report your actions to the higher-ups. My great Xia's envoy will also inform your emperor. Lien Baoqing's face was flushed and his eyes were bloodshot. His mind was spinning quickly on how to kill this bastard in front of him. Not only did he have to die, but his entire family had to die as well. Rinpoche touched Lien Baoqing's cheek. This action made the surrounding people feel disgusted. Therefore, before that, you have to be careful and don't commit any more crimes. Otherwise, I'll throw you into prison and the gift you brought will still belong to Her Majesty. However, by then you might not be the one to send it to the Emperor. As for the rest, you can do whatever you want. Rinpoche laughed. Rinpoche's words made Lien Baoqing feel as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe. Rinpoche walked back to the center of the square and said, "I don't care how this incident happened today. I hope that all of you and the people who will come after you know that no matter what your status is in your own country or how tyrannical you usually are, you have to remember that this is Dayo. Whether you are a dragon or a tiger, you have to crouch down. I don't care if you guys fight to death outside, but don't create trouble for me here." After Rinpoche finished speaking, the surrounding people were dead silent. Following which, those Dayo people who were watching the commotion cheered loudly. Rinpoche revealed a smile to the surrounding people. He softened his voice and said gently, "Everyone here isn't an ordinary person. Treat yourself better. If you want to make things difficult for yourself, don't do it here. Xiongpai, let's go." Rinpoche snapped his fingers and walked outside. At the same time, he didn't forget to shout, "Jianghu, let the Public Order Bureau handle this matter." "Yes, sir," the burly man called Jianghu quickly replied. This Sir Rin had just been appointed not long ago. They had discussed about him in private and more or less looked down on him. After this incident, he realized that this Sir Rin was much more ruthless than what he looked like on the surface. He really liked the way Rinpoche handled today. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.